Part 13. Fringe Artists in the Entertainment Industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 122. Chapter 122-120. If you lose everything, go back to eating soft food. The weather in late April was still a bit cool, and the wind in Beijing was very strong, accompanied by sandstorms all over the sky. When Chen Lian came out of the airport, he felt that his hair was filled with sand and he could hardly open his eyes. Bah! What the hell is going on this year? There's a sandstorm at the end of April. Chen Lian sat in the car and sighed, feeling as if he was coming back from Longmen Inn. Zhang Guorong, who was sitting next to him, looked at Chen Lian with disgust and was troubled by his vulgar behavior. This guy looked like a little gangster when he was not creating. Can you be normal? I'm so disgusted. Zhang Guorong moved to the other side of the car. Chen Lian turned his head and glanced at Zhang Guorong, whose hair was messed up, and curled his lips, not wanting to talk to this unrefined man. Where are you going later? Do you want to go to Beijing Film Studio with me? Zhang Guorong twisted his neck and felt sand getting into his clothes. Chen Lian shook the dust from his hair and said, I have something to do today, so you can take me home first. Okay, that guy will come over tomorrow. Zhang Guorong didn't care, and then said to the driver who came to pick him up, Master, please go to Zushikao. Chen Lian raised his eyebrows and said, Do you still remember where I live? I'm not Alzheimer's. By the time the car arrived at Zushikao, the sandstorm had subsided a lot. Chen Lian opened the car door and said to Zhang Guorong, Are you going back to the apartment tonight? I have something to see you for. Reply, what do you want from me? Zhang Guorong asked curiously. It's definitely not about playing mahjong, but I really can't guess what it is. Chen Lian smiled and said mysteriously, You'll find out tonight, it's a good thing. After saying that, Chen Lian opened the car door and went out. Zhang Guorong looked at Chen Lian's back and opened his mouth, feeling a little depressed. What can't he say now? He has to wait until night? After getting his suitcase from the trunk, Chen Lian trotted into the alley. Second uncle. I'm back, Chen Lian shouted impatiently as he walked into the yard. Xiao Linmuo, who was chatting with Uncle Qi in the room, heard Chen Lian's voice. A smile appeared on his fat white face and he said to Uncle Qi, Why is this kid so snoring? Uncle Qi knocked the cigarette in his hand and said nonchalantly, Young people are all like this. Second uncle, Chen Lian, who pushed open the door, asked excitedly before putting down the box, Is second uncle going to buy VCD? Uncle Qi sat next to him and cleared his throat, tapping the dry tobacco pole on the table. Only then did Chen Lian notice that Uncle Qi was there. He immediately put down the box in his hand and ran over and shouted with a low eyebrow, Master, you are here too. Yeah, Uncle Qi hummed, then looked at Xiao Linmu and said, Xiao, you two will chat and go to my place for a drink tonight. Xiao Linmu immediately smiled and said, Okay, I'll treat you to a drink tonight. Chen Lian stood nearby and said with a smile, I'll invite you tonight. How about we go to Fangshan restaurant? Uncle Qi glanced at Chen Lian, hit Chen Lian on the shoulder with his cigarette rod and said, Waste of money. Yes, your filial piety is in vain. Let's eat at home in the evening and save money. After Uncle Qi left, Chen Lian excitedly pulled Xiao Linmu and said, Second uncle, are you planning to make VCDs when you come here this time? It's no wonder that Chen Lian is excited. VCD will be a market worth tens of billions in the next few years. If it's a few million or tens of millions, Chen Lian really won't be that excited. But once the number exceeds 100 million, it will be completely different. Let go of me first. What do you look like? You are not stable at all. Xiao Linmu looked at Chen Lian angrily, and then couldn't help scolding, Your master is here and you have a low eyebrow, but you are like this when I am here. You look like you're not stingy, but you still have two faces. Chen Lian slumped on the chair and said nonchalantly, "Who makes me unable to defeat my master?" Xiao Linmu's face darkened, and he called Chen Lian with his chubby hand. While fighting back, he asked, "I can't beat you, do you dare to fight back?" Chen Lian, that makes sense. After Xiao Linmu hit Chen Lian a few times, he sat back panting, stared at Chen Lian and said, "What? Still not convinced?" "Submit," Chen Lian shouted in frustration. After cutting off his nephew, Xiao Linmu felt much better. Then he got down to business. He took out a stack of documents from his wallet and put it on the table. He said, "I have almost planned the VCD thing. Here are the information, take a look at the contract, it's at least 3 million in the early stage." Chen Lian took it and flipped through it casually, then said, "I won't read these, but 3 million is not enough. The threshold for this thing is too low. If you want to do it well, you have to develop it yourself. Spend more money to make the chip, let's study the decoder, we can't keep buying it from others." Xiao Linmu saw that Chen Lian didn't even read the information, and said angrily, "I want you to teach me. 3 million is enough. My factory can use it directly. Just change the production line. It's not as much as you think. That's all right. I'll pay the 3 million. Your factory will count as 3 million. How about half of the shares between the two of us?" Chen Lian spoke in layman's terms arrogantly, and Xiao Linmu almost died of anger. Looking at Chen Lian, who didn't understand anything above, Xiao Linmu sighed and looked helplessly at the photo of his sister on the altar in the room, and said resignedly, "Okay, if you offer 1 million, I'll give you 4% 10 shares, keep the remaining money in your hand as your wife's book." If Xiao Linmu hadn't had a son and Chen Lian's parents were gone, he would have been too lazy to do business with a layman like Chen Lian. The worst he could do was subsidize him more in the future. Chen Lian saw Xiao Linmu's disgust and couldn't help but curl his lips. He didn't know how to do business, but we have vision. "Second uncle, I have money. I went to Paris and sold paintings and earned more than 3 million. It's fine if I can afford a little more. I don't know how much money you have. If you give 2 million, you'll have to pay for it empty." Xiao Lin, who was collecting information, paused, looked up at Chen Lian and asked, "How much did you just say?" "It's more than 300. I have a partner who shared more than 300 with her, or it could be a little more," Chen Lian explained calmly. Xiao Linmu's chubby little hands couldn't help but tremble. "Is art so profitable? Then why do you still do business? I have worked so hard for so many years to save more than 100 yuan, but my nephew has doubled his wealth by painting a few paintings." A deep sense of frustration welled up in Xiao Linmu's heart, but more importantly, he was relieved. After all, we are proud of our nephew. It took a while for Xiao Linmu to come back to his senses. Chen Lian, who was looking at him shivering, wanted to raise his hand to give him a moment, but he put it down again as soon as he raised his hand. "I have grown up and cannot fight anymore. Go and offer incense to your parents." Xiao Linmu looked at Chen Lian and said seriously. Chen Lian stood up immediately, walked to the altar, took out the incense, lit it with a lighter and bowed 3 times before slowly putting the incense on it. Chen Lian's success made Xiao Linmu very happy, and he no longer stubbornly cared about leaving more wife money for Chen Lian. He could spend millions on any wife. That's not a joke. After the two discussed in the room for half an hour, Chen Lian finally took out 2.5 million, and Xiao Linmu came up with the rest. Chen Lian only wanted 49% of the shares, and he would not participate in the management. Giving Xiao Linmu absolute controlling rights is the right way. Anyway, the second uncle will not trick him. After discussing it, Chen Lian discussed with Xiao Linmu about hiring a spokesperson. "Second uncle, you have to do marketing these days. If you find a celebrity to endorse your product, the product will definitely become an instant hit. You must do more advertising. Xiao Linmu frowned and said, "It's very expensive to hire celebrities for advertising. We definitely can't hire big stars with the money we have. We also have to go to TV stations to advertise. The money is quite expensive. You don't have to worry about this. I'll take care of the celebrity endorsements. You don't have to pay for it from the factory," Chen Lian said, patting his chest. Xiao Linmu looked at the confident Chen Lian and asked, "Who are you going to find? Haven't you just made 2 movies? How many people can you meet?" "I haven't decided yet." Chen Lian clapped his fingers and said, "Gong Li, Leslie Chung and Wang Zuxian are all fine. They are all friends. I am debating whether to find one or both." Xiao Linmu, you are really good at pretending. In the evening, after Chen Lian had dinner with his second uncle and his master, he took a taxi to Zhang Guorong's apartment. After much deliberation, it would be better to trick Zhang Guorong into becoming the spokesperson. There are not many celebrities who are more famous than him in the mainland. In Zhang Guorong's apartment, he was wearing a facial mask and sipping red wine. After opening the door to Chen Lian, he couldn't help but ask, "What are you looking for with me?" Chen Lian smiled as he walked into the room and poured himself a glass of wine before saying, "Good thing, I'll give you some money." "Give me money?" Zhang Guorong's eyes under the mask were filled with deep suspicion, and he said suspiciously, "Aren't you looking for me to play mahjong and want to win my money? Then I will give you money, okay?" Chen Lian, who was drinking, paused, glanced at Zhang Guorong and said, "You still know that your poker skills are bad, so I'm not here to play mahjong with you. If you don't play mahjong, how are you going to give me money?" Zhang Guorong sat on the sofa with a wine glass in his hand, looked at Chen Lian with his legs crossed and asked, "You must be up to no good. Hurry up and tell me what's going on." Chen Lian also sat over, put his arm around Zhang Guorong's shoulders and said, "We are friends, right? Shouldn't friends help each other?" Seeing the fox smile on Chen Lian's face, Leslie Chung shook his head decisively. "You don't have any sense of loyalty," Chen Lian criticized him before saying with a smile, "I really want to give you money, and I want you to be your spokesperson in an advertisement." "A commercial?" Leslie Chung was stunned for a moment, then immediately shook his head and said, "I don't do commercials. I have only filmed 3 commercials in so many years since my debut." When Zhang Guorong said this, Chen Lian remembered in a daze that he seemed to have never seen Zhang Guorong's advertisement, which was difficult to handle. Zhang Guorong had his own principles, and Chen Lian could not do unethical things based on friendship. "I really didn't think about this. Now let's forget it. I'll go back and ask Sister Xiaoxian and Gong Li," Chen Lian said helplessly. Zhang Guorong hummed, and then asked curiously, "What kind of advertisement do you want me to shoot? Who are you working as a lobbyist for?" Chen Lian leaned on the sofa and said, "VCD, I am a lobbyist for myself. I invested in a VCD factory." "Yourself?" Zhang Guorong remembered how Chen Lian didn't understand anything when he was doing financial management in Xiangjiang, and couldn't help but said, "Just waste your money, just engage in art and make movies." Chen Lian, is the image that I don't know how to do business so deeply ingrained? Just wait, I have to impress you. If I don't earn a few small goals, I won't trust Chen Lian snorted. Zhang Guorong smiled and said, "Don't lose everything and eat soft food later, but just let Xiaoxian support you, she is rich." There is another chapter, I am addicted to petting cats. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 123. Chapter 123-121. Am I that casual? It is absolutely impossible to eat soft rice. No matter how depressed Chen Lian is, he will not spend a woman's money. How can a man eat soft food, no matter how fragrant it is? However, Zhang Guorong really hopes that Chen Lian can eat soft rice, and only eat soft rice from Wang Zuxian. It seems that he is embarrassed to go out. Chen Lian has a lot of money. It's only 1995 and he has a bank balance of several million, so he won't be in a state of poverty. However, after making so much money, it is indeed inconvenient to still live in a large courtyard. It is really inconvenient to have no darkroom or studio. And you also need to buy a mobility scooter. Taking a taxi is very inconvenient. Sometimes you may not be able to get a taxi in half an hour. There are relatively few taxis in Beijing. When will you go to Beijing Film Studio tomorrow? Chen Lian asked as he drank all the wine in his glass. Zhang Guorong took off the mask on his face and said, "Just be there at 9 o'clock. I will try on makeup tomorrow." Speaking of this, Chen Lian was a little confused. He looked at Leslie Chung and asked, "The director has never met me. You just said one word and gave me this role." Otherwise Zhang Guorong patted his face and said arrogantly, "I am Zhang Guorong, just a small character." Chen Lian, "You are awesome." Zhang Guorong hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Actually, Director Cheng also helped. He put in a good word for you at the Beijing Film Studio." Director Cheng, Chen Lian frowned, wondering why Director Cheng wanted to help him suddenly. Zhang Guorong actually doesn't quite understand. Director Cheng is not such a warm-hearted person. There must be a purpose for doing this. As for the purpose, it's hard to say. Maybe he is attracted to Chen Lian. However, it is not as simple as Leslie Chung said for this role to fall on Chen Lian. The producers will naturally take all aspects into consideration. The movie itself is a co-production, so it is inevitable to use mainland actors. As for who to use, it is naturally very important. Good looks and decent acting skills are the most basic. Of course, the premise is that the actor is talented from Beijing Film Studio. After all, this movie was shot together with Beijing Film Studio, and it also used the largest studio of Beijing Film Studio. Naturally, there must be resource exchange. The Beijing Film Studio itself did not recommend many actors, and Mr. Huang was the first choice. However, Leslie Chung intervened and suggested Chen Lian. The Beijing Film Studio was surprised for a while. Chen Lian's reputation has been heard by many people at Beijing Film Studio. Nortel's most mysterious student. A cutting-edge artist. The second male lead in director Cheng's new movie. The rumored partner of Gong Li and Cheng Myren. With so many strange and unattainable names put together, there are a few people in the industry who have never heard of Chen Lian's name. Of course, most people know Chen Lian because of the gossip about him, Gong Li and Cheng Myren. Beijing Film Studio originally wanted to promote teacher Huang, but they hesitated after facing such a great figure as Chen Lian. This is considered a member of the family. Students from Nortel can be directly assigned to the Beijing Film Studio after graduation. Moreover, both Zhang Guorong and director Cheng recommended him, so it was hard not to take his face into consideration. One is a producer representing Hong Kong, and the other is a top director with a strong domestic reputation. Beijing Film Studio also has to give them face. Speaking of which, Chen Lian was quite lucky to get this role. Zhang Guorong, who was doing skincare in the living room, watched Chen Lian pour himself another glass of red wine, and couldn't help but urge, "I'm going to bed, why don't you leave? Don't forget it at 9 o'clock tomorrow." Chen Lian looked at Zhang Guorong who was yawning, so he had to drink the red wine in the glass and get up and leave. Early the next morning, while Chen Lian was still sleeping, Qiao Linmu got up early. Time waited for no one. Now he quickly returned to Yangcheng to start up the factory. Guang province had already heard a lot of news that someone was planning to make VCD. When Chen Lian heard the noise, he got up from the bed. When he came out and saw Qiao Linmu packing his luggage, he asked, "Second uncle, are you leaving today?" "Why don't you leave?" Qiao Linmu said as he packed up, "Everything has been agreed upon. Just go back and remit the money. Time waits for no one." Chen Lian looked at Jiao Linmu's fat body and felt that such mobility should not appear on him, but he still said, let's play for a few more days. I also plan to buy some gifts for my sister and aunt today for you to take back. Woolen cloth. Jiao Linmu zipped up his bag, raised his head and said, Yang Cheng has everything, so there's no need for it. Just go about your own business. Seeing that his second uncle was so anxious to go back, Chen Lian didn't say anything. He held his wallet and said, then I'll buy some breakfast later. Okay, hurry up, I have to go to the airport at 9:30, Jiao Linmu urged. His whole body was full of energy, as if he had a second spring. Chen Lian smiled, and then ran out to buy breakfast. Old BJ's had many kinds of breakfast. Chen Lian bought several items, such as coke rings, fried dough sticks, fried liver, steamed buns, and tofu puffs. No matter what, we can't let my second uncle fly hungry. While eating breakfast, Jiao Linmu looked around Chen Lian's small room and said, if you have time these days, go out and look at the house. It's not easy to find a wife if you live here. Yeah, I understand, Chen Lian responded while sucking on the fried liver. He must buy a house, but he just doesn't have time to look at it now. Buying a house these days is not an easy task. Apartments are fine, but courtyard houses are troublesome. Chen Lian plans to buy 2 apartments and a courtyard house. If a good friend has no place to live in the future, it can also save him. Jiao Linmu took a bite of the bun and said, you just need to know what's going on. You're already 22 this year, so you should find a girlfriend as soon as possible. After nagging, Jiao Linmu asked again, you asked Leslie Chung yesterday but he didn't agree. Who are you going to find to shoot the commercial? Chen Lian wiped the liver fried soup from his mouth and said, don't worry, I'll call back and ask. I'll definitely find it. You go back and make a finished product first, otherwise there won't be any product for the commercial. Okay, I'll try my best to help you with this matter. If a new brand wants to become famous, it needs to be well publicized, Jiao Linmu responded. After Jiao Linmu and Chen Liang finished their breakfast, they took a taxi to the airport. Chen Lian also packed up and headed to Beijing Film Studio. It has been 20 years since the Beijing Film Studio moved to the Third Ring Road. In the first 20 years, the Beijing Film Studio could be considered a suburb, surrounded by farmland and pig pens, but now it is considered a lively place on the Third Ring Road. The entire Third Ring Road was open to traffic last year. This year's Third Ring Road was really lively. Chen Lian remembered that there were still a lot of wastelands here in the first 2 years. At the entrance of Beijing Film Studio, Chen Lian was stopped by the security guard just as he was about to enter. Hey! What are you doing here, kid? The man wearing a hat in the security room leaned half of his body out of the window and called Chen Lian. Chen Lian turned his head and glanced, walked over and said politely, Uncle, I am a student from Nortel. I have accepted a film and I will come over today to start work. Do you have any proof? Letters of recommendation, letters of introduction, etc. The uncle looked at Chen Lian's handsome face and asked without doubting that he was there. Chen Lian was stunned for a moment, then took out the phone from his pants pocket and said, I really didn't bring it with me. Please wait for me to make a call. After the old man in the security room took a look at the phone in Chen Lian's hand and his clothes, his eyes flashed behind his reading glasses and he said, don't bother me, can you tell me which movie it is? Singing in the middle of the night, the crew from Xiangjiang. Chen Lian put down the phone and said. The uncle said oh, hesitated a little and said, okay, then come over and sign and go in. This saves trouble. Chen Lian leaned by the window and took the pen handed over by the uncle, signed the registration book and went in. The old man in the security room looked at Chen Lian's leaving figure and muttered in a low voice, I don't know which compound he came from. But he's really handsome. I'm sure he'll become a big star. The uncle smiled happily, sat back in his chair, took out the newspaper and continued reading. Chen Lian didn't expect that one day he would be regarded as a compound, but he was right, a compound was also a compound, and the people who came out of the courtyard where the workers' and peasants' brothers lived were no worse than those who came out of the compound where cotters lived. That's it. If you say this, you will probably laugh to death, but who knows about this little episode? After asking a few people at Beijing Film Studio, Chen Lian successfully found the floor where the midnight singing crew was located. I knocked on the door and went in. It was quite lively inside. There were several people sitting in the conference room in twos and threes. But Chen Lian only knew one, no, two, Leslie Chung and Wu Jianlian. When Zhang Guorong saw Chen Lian coming in, he immediately put down his crossed legs and stood up and shouted, "Lian, come here." Everyone in the room focused their attention on Chen Lian. Director Yu Rentai also looked at him a few times, with a look of satisfaction in his eyes. Chen Lian walked to Zhang Guorong and nodded, then turned his eyes to Yu Rentai, who was sitting on the chair without standing up, and his pupils shrank slightly. The director seems to have some physical problems and is not very mobile. Zhang Guorong smiled and pulled Chen Lian and introduced him, "This is Chen Lian. Isn't he very handsome?" Yu Rentai sat on the chair and nodded to Chen Lian and said, "I am Yu Rentai, the director of this movie." Chen Lian watched Yu Rentai stand up with his hands, stretched out his hand and said, "Chen Lian, I am very happy to cooperate with Director Yu. I have watched Director Yu's The White-Haired Witch the year before last year." Yu Rentai shook hands with Chen Lian, and then said with a smile, "I hope we can have a pleasant cooperation." Zhang Guorong interrupted at this time, "Wow, no, have you seen The White-Haired Witch? Why haven't I heard you say that? Why do I tell you after I've seen it and let you show off?" Chen Lian retorted. The White-Haired Witch is played by Leslie Chung and Lin Qingxia. Chen Lian has indeed seen it a few times, but he has never told Leslie Chung to prevent him from thinking that he is a fan of his movie. Wu Jianlian next to her looked at Chen Lian, who was joking with Leslie Chung, and stretched out his hand and said, "Hello, I am Wu Jianlian." "Chen Lian, it's nice to meet you." Chen Lian and Wu Jianlian also shook hands, and then said with a smile, "I really liked the man and woman you played last year, and I never thought I would have the opportunity to work with you. Thank you for your like." "Director Li did a good job," Wu Jianlian said modestly, but the corners of her mouth were still slightly raised. The other people in the room looked at Chen Lian, who was so good at talking, and their thoughts changed slightly. They just wanted to be easy to get along with, but they were afraid that this second male lead who suddenly appeared would be difficult to deal with. Han Shanping, the director of Beijing Film Studio, who had just been in office for a year, looked at Chen Lian and was quite curious about this rising star in the capital's film industry. Is he an actor who pursues art, or an artist who pursues career as an actor? Han Shanping nodded at Chen Lian and said, "Chen Lian, I have heard your name many times recently. Have you ever thought about coming to Beijing Film Studio?" Chen Lian was very familiar with Han Shanping's face. He could recognize it without being introduced. He smiled and said, "Hello, Director Han. I'm only a freshman now. I'll wait until I graduate. But I still yearn for Beijing Film Studio. Do you recognize me?" Han Shanping was a little surprised and looked at Chen Lian strangely. Chen Lian smiled and said, "I am a student from Nortel, so it's not surprising that I know the director of Bifang Film Studio." Hearing Chen Lian's answer, Han Shanping smiled and said, "Haha, it's not surprising to say that." A few people laughed, and after a while of greetings, they officially started working. Today's task was mainly to try on makeup. It was very simple. Compared with the efficiency of the crew from Xiangjiang, it was not very efficient. In less than 2 hours, all the makeup trials were completed. Chen Lian looked down at the gown on his body and felt a little pain in his head. Why was it a gown again? I'm not Kong Yuji, so why can't I take off my long gown? Chen Lian, who couldn't take off his gown, looked at Leslie Cheung, who was handsome in a suit and windbreaker, and sighed, "Why is it always like this every time he plays the second male lead for Leslie Cheung? In the last movie, I wore a long gown and played a servant, and Leslie Cheung played a playboy brother. In this movie, I wore a long gown and played a street actor, and Leslie Cheung played an opera star. No matter in terms of character appearance or identity, the gap is so huge that it is simply unreasonable." Chen Lian said somewhat depressedly, "I won't be the second male lead for you next time." Zhang Guorong, who was looking at the stinky beauty in the mirror, turned around and looked at Chen Lian's gown. He immediately understood and couldn't help laughing and said, "Who makes you not as handsome as me? Chen Lian, don't your conscience hurt? You are telling lies with your eyes open. Dishonest." Wu Qianlian was a little confused when she heard the inexplicable conversation between the two, but she was not familiar with Leslie Cheung and Chen Lian, so it was difficult for her to interject and ask. Leslie Cheung glanced at Wu Qianlian and took the initiative to explain, "In the last movie, he wore a gown and I wore a suit. This time, he was jealous, haha." Hearing Zhang Guorong's explanation, Wu Qianlian smiled, looked at Chen Lian, who was wearing a long gown, and said, "You look good in a long gown." "Thank you." Chen Lian showed a smile and said, "You still have vision, unlike some people who are very narcissistic." Zhang Guorong looked at Chen Lian, who was exuding charm again, and quickly stood between the two of them. He deliberately pulled Chen Lian to the side and said, "Don't mess around. I promised Xiao Xian to watch you." Chen Lian looked at Leslie Cheung with a question mark on his face and said, "What did I do?" "Put away that smile of yours. Don't try to seduce Wu Qianlian," Zhang Guorong warned. Chen Lian said depressedly, "Am I that casual? Am I that kind of person? Am I a man who can seduce others casually? Have. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 124. Chapter 124 122. Sooner or later, singing will be better than you. How to act as a naive young actor who has dreams but is frustrated. Chen Lian looked at the script in his hand and thought about this unfamiliar problem. In his 2 lifetimes, he had always had smooth sailing, and he had never experienced being unappreciated for his talent. It's easy to have a dream, but it's hard to deal with the naivete of a small person like this who has unrecognized talents. After Chen Lian thought for a while, he was ready to go to the entrance of Beijing Film Studio. Look at the state of the extras squatting at the door waiting for the scene. They are very similar to the characters in the script. The original second male lead in Midnight Sing was Mr. Huang, but Mr. Huang's acting skills in this movie were very mediocre, without any highlights, and was completely overshadowed by Leslie Cheung. If he didn't have so many scenes, he would be no different from a passerby. Chen Lian will not let himself play like Teacher Huang. What's the point of an actor not shining? Even if he is a supporting role, he must perform the role well. As the second male lead, if you want to perform well, you must not overshadow the protagonist. If you don't fully understand the role, it will be difficult to perform well. In the conference room, Chen Lian looked at the actors who were thinking about the script. Without disturbing them, he quietly stood up and went out. There are dozens of extras squatting at the entrance of Beijing Film Studio every day. After Chen Lian came out of Beijing Film Studio, he found a corner and squatted on the roadside to hide himself among the extras. Have you heard that Leslie Cheung has come to Beijing Film Studio? If I can act in a movie with Leslie Cheung, I will also act in the background, an actor in his early 20s said with a half-lit cigarette butt in his mouth. A man in his 30s next to him snorted and said, "Why else do you want to act? The actors who work with such stars are all powerful actors. I don't know how many actors are competing for a small supporting role. We can act a passerby would be nice. The young man took out a lighter from his pocket and lit half of the cigarette butt. With hope in his eyes, he slowly exhaled blue smoke and said, I will definitely become a big star in the future, and I will definitely star in a movie with Leslie Cheung. The old extra in his 30s glanced at his roommate who could barely afford to smoke, and there was a sarcasm on his lips, but he didn't say anything. Didn't I think the same way 2 years ago, but now I'm still squatting here as an extra. How can it be so easy to become a character? Chen Lian scratched his head beside him. He recognized the extravaganza's ambition, but he was not optimistic about it. What kind of place is the entertainment industry? It would be harder for an extra actor with no background to become a big star than to land on the moon. However, this extra actor is very suitable for Chen Lian to observe. He feels that he has the energy of the characters in the script. He is young and has dreams, and believes that the world will definitely belong to him in the future. Innocence is the easiest thing to disappear in this world. This extra performer has not been severely beaten by the society, and his eyes are still shining. Chen Lian came over and took out a cigarette holder from his pocket and asked, What do you call me, brother? Are you going to be the one? How long have you been performing as a group? The extra actor's eyes lit up when he saw the hungtashan in Chen Lian's hand. He smiled, took the cigarette, smelled it and said, My name is Li Hua. I've been here for a month. Chen Lian glanced at the extra actor in his 30s, ignored the longing in his eyes, put the cigarette in his pocket and asked, Have you acted in a movie in the past month? The middle-aged man watched Chen Lian put away the cigarette. His expression immediately changed and he snorted, I don't have eyesight, I almost don't know who to pick a trap with. Chen Lian glanced at him without hesitation, turned his head and looked at Li Hua who put hungtashan in his pocket and asked, Brother, you're welcome, I still have some left after you've beaten me. Tell me why you want to be an extra. Li Hua paused after hearing this, smiled a little sheepishly and said, I've never smoked such a good cigarette, so I'll keep it for next time. After explaining something, Li Hua said enthusiastically, I'm from northern Henan. The place where we live is very poor. In our village, the village chief has a TV at his house. When I was a child, I watched Shanghai on the beach at the village chief's house and wanted to be Su Wenqiang. Later when I grew up, after a while, I realized that it was a performance. Let me tell you, I just want to play Su Wenqiang. If I become a big star in the future, I must play Su Wenqiang. Chen Lian was listening to Li Hua talking about his dream. He said that he went to work in the city and knew that he could act in movies as an extra, so he quit his job and came to work as an extra. He said that he had played a role in a TV series a few days ago. There was a line from a vendor who said he had met several big stars. Li Hua talks a lot and has a strong desire to share. He keeps talking. When he gets excited, he puts the hungtashan in his pocket and takes it out to light it up, but then takes it back. Chen Lian silently took out the hungtashan from his pocket and threw it into Li Hua's hand and said, Thank you, brother, I gave you this pack of cigarettes. I hope you will become a big star one day. Li Hua caught the cigarette in his hand, looked at the gentleman in front of him, scratched his head with some honesty and said, When I become a big star, I will definitely give you something better. Chen Lian smiled, patted Li Hua on the shoulder and said, Then I'll remember it. Just don't pretend you don't know me then. That's not possible, I'm not that kind of person, Li Hua said categorically, then leaned towards Chen Lian and asked in a low voice, Brother, you're not here to be an extra, are you? Chen Lian smiled and asked, Don't I look like him? Li Hua shook his head and then pointed at the group of extras around him and said, Look at what we are wearing, what you are wearing, and you are so handsome. Not to mention the extras, even celebrities are not as good looking as you. Looking at Chen Lian's handsome face, Li Hua chuckled and said, But being handsome is not enough. Being an actor requires strength. Don't think I'm not good looking, but my acting skills are definitely better than yours. Look at my acting skills now, none of the actors are good looking. Chen Lian, your criterion for judging acting skills is who is ugly. However, this is indeed the case in the current mainland entertainment industry. Powerful actors are generally not handsome. After chatting with Li Hua for a while, Chen Lian left with a smile. He was already confused about Li Hua's mentality. He would just go back and think about it again. There are many differences between the troupes of the 1990s and the young opera actors of the Republic of China in many aspects. Whether it is the behavior or temperament of the characters, the only things that are the same are the enthusiasm in their hearts and the light in their eyes. Chen Lian can't observe and speculate too much, otherwise he won't be able to portray the feeling of the Republic of China. He can just capture the inner qualities of the characters. After Chen Lian left, the middle-aged extras who had been watching the excitement immediately came to Li Hua and said, "Here comes a silly old man. He gives me a pack of hungtashan when he listens to someone telling a story. Li Hua, give me a pack of hungtashan." Hearing what the middle-aged extras said about Chen Lian, Li Hua immediately became unhappy. He turned around to avoid his hand and said, "I'm not even good enough myself. I call someone stupid, but I still have the nerve to smoke." Middle-aged extras, hey. This kid really thinks of himself as a person. Is he also a fool? In the room dedicated to midnight singing at the Beijing Film Studio, Chen Lian opened the door and walked in. Before he could sit down, Zhang Guorong came over and asked, "What were you doing just now?" "I'm planning to play with you. I went to observe the characters and chatted with an extra actor at the door for a while," Chen Lian explained, and then asked, "Are you familiar with your lines? Which scene are you going to do?" Zhang Guorong didn't pay attention to Chen Lian's so-called observation. "Aren't all actors like this?" He took the script and said, "This is this part. I will teach you to sing this part in the theater." Chen Lian raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why do you think of doing this scene? It's not difficult. What's so easy about it? Just tell me whether you want to go or not," Leslie Chung said as he took the script. "Let's go. The leading actor has spoken. How can I, a young actor, refuse?" Zhang Guorong immediately said, "Come on then." 10 minutes later. "You're wrong. Singing relies on breath, what are you shouting? You have a loud voice. Didn't you say there was dubbing? And you followed the lines." Chen Lian looked at Zhang Guorong, who was smiling happily, and finally understood why she wanted to do this scene. She just wanted to ask him for advice, and then took the opportunity to laugh at herself for being so bad at singing. "You're so boring." Chen Lian looked at Leslie Chung speechlessly, threw away the script in his hand and said, "Come here to find a sense of presence, right? I haven't even learned anything, okay?" Zhang Guorong smiled and said, "Didn't you say that you can learn to sing in just a few days? Now you know how difficult it is. I just want you to recognize the reality. Chen Lian, just wait for me. Sooner or later I will be better at singing than you." Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 125. Chapter 125-123. I want to take you home. In 1995, the largest studio in Asia was Studio No. 1 of Beijing Film Studio. Because the interior scenery needed to be built for midnight singing was too large, we cooperated with Beijing Film Studio and built the movie set in Studio No. 1. That theater. When Chen Lian walked into Studio No. 1 and looked at the huge and gorgeous theater, he couldn't help but click his tongue. This theater was too luxurious and the stage was also very exquisite. It was a pity that when he waited for his part, there was no room here. To be burned once. Leslie Chung stood next to Chen Lian, put his hand on his shoulder and said proudly, "Don't look at it, this is my stage. It will only belong to you after the fire burns it down. I am the corner and you are the street boy." We are treated differently. Oh. What are you showing off? What are you showing off? Wu Jianlian watched from the side and felt that Zhang Guorong was different from what she imagined. He felt a bit childish, but he was very approachable. In comparison, the younger Chen Lian was more mature. It's such a strange feeling. As an artist, shouldn't Chen Lian be the immature one? Wu Jianlian turned to look at Chen Lian's slightly helpless expression, feeling that Zhang Guorong should call him brother. Chen Lian was too lazy to pay attention to Zhang Guorong's show-off. He nodded at Wu Jianlian with inquiring eyes, walked to Yu Rentai and asked, "Director, when will my scene start? If there is no scene for me these days, I will go take care of your own personal matters first." Yu Rentai was reading the storyboard script. Hearing this, he raised his head and looked at Chen Lian and said, "There won't be any scenes for you in the next few days. Your scenes will be at the back. It won't be your turn until everything here is burned down. In the past few days, you just mind your own business." Chen Lian nodded, smiled, and said, "Okay, thank you, director." Zhang Guorong next to him asked curiously, "Aren't you going to create again, right?" No. Chen Lian dispersed the cigarettes for several people around him, then lit it himself before saying, "I want to go see a house. The place I live in now is too small and inconvenient." Zhang Guorong nodded when he heard this, and then suddenly said excitedly, "Buy my building. If I come to the mainland in the future, I can play mahjong every day. By the way, I made an appointment with Wu Jianlian to play mahjong tonight. When you arrive, come here when it's time." Chen Lian, I only know how to play mahjong. I'm afraid I wasn't a mahjong in my previous life. However, Chen Lian was really attracted to the apartment where Zhang Guorong lived. The environment and layout were both good and worth a visit. Chen Lian thought about it for a while, and then said, "Okay, I'll go there and see. What time will we play mahjong in the evening?" "We'll finish work at 6 o'clock and go to Maxim's for dinner first," Zhang Guorong warned and was called away by Yu Rentai. Chen Lian flicked the ash from his cigarette, looked at Wu Jianlian and said, "See you in the evening." "See you in the evening." After Wu Jianlian said that, she looked at Chen Lian's leaving figure, then withdrew her gaze and turned to listen to Yu Rentai's drama. Very angry. Chen Lian is surprisingly angry now. He didn't expect the housing prices here to be so outrageous. How can a shabby apartment be so expensive? $2,000 per square meter. Why not grab it? Oh. In order to grab foreign exchange from foreign businessmen, let's not talk about it. However, after chatting with the real estate sales here for a while, Chen Lian felt a little unbearable. He still underestimated the housing prices in this era. The main commercial houses on the market are export houses. The price of export houses is not less than $1,500 per square meter, and the highest is $3,000 per square meter. In other words, the highest housing price in Beijing is 26,000 square meters. Chen Lian felt that this was not the same person he had known for 96 years. In the current commercial housing market in Beijing, the price of domestically sold housing is low, with high-end ones costing around 5,000. However, there are too few houses, and most of them are near the Third Ring Road. Calculating based on this price, he couldn't buy a few houses with his money. He earned 3.2 million in Xiangjiang and 3.65 million in France. After deducting the messy expenses, Chen Lian only got 6,480,000. If you use this money to buy an export apartment, you can sell 4 apartments of 100 square meters. It's so damn expensive. The most important thing is that Chen Lian still needs to transfer 2 million to his second uncle, which means that with the money in Chen Lian's hands, he can only buy 3 houses at most. With so much money, you can only buy 3 houses. Thinking about it, you will lose money. Chen Lian turned his attention to the courtyard house without any hesitation. The courtyard house was much cheaper than the building. A 400 square meter courtyard house only costs a little over 1 million, which is not much better than an apartment sold for export. If you buy 2 courtyard houses now, you can make back the money several times in 10 years. If you buy an apartment, the price will still be the same in 10 years. It's not cost effective no matter from any point of view. At $2,000 per square meter, foreign businessmen are really making money. After all, the number of commercial housing is still too small. When there are more commercial housing in a few years, it won't be so outrageous. If Chen Lian remembers correctly, the housing prices in Beijing in 2005 were only 5 to 6,000 yuan per square meter. Domestic sales of houses are now around 5,000 in 1995, and still between 5,000 and 6,000 in 2005. It is outrageous that prices have not increased in 10 years. When buying a house in 1995, you must not buy a building or an apartment. Whoever buys it will be a fool. Of course, Chen Lian would not be that idiot, so he turned around and went to look for a suitable courtyard house. At the worst, he could buy it and renovate it. Spending more money is not a problem at all. I really envy those well-established employees who have welfare benefits and housing allocations. However, it is difficult to find a courtyard house. There are too few courtyard houses with a better layout and better location. Chen Lian wandered around the capital for a long time but still couldn't find a good house. He had to ask someone to inquire about it. At a canteen in Fangjia Hutong, Chen Lian bought a bottle of Coke and took 2 sips. Huh! Chen Lian breathed a sigh of relief. He was exhausted from walking in the alley for a long time. Walking around the alley was too troublesome. It was difficult to get into the car and taxis were not willing to get in. He didn't have a bicycle and could only use his legs. Now it seems that the most important thing before buying a house is to buy a car. Chen Lian raised the Coke and was about to drink it in one sip when he saw an acquaintance come in. "Boss, take the camel bag." The princess, who was wearing sunglasses and dressed casually, said, standing in front of the counter. Then she glanced at Chen Lian. She took off her sunglasses in surprise and said, "Chen Lian? Why are you here?" Chen Lian put down his hand and said with a smile, "What a coincidence. I'm looking for a house." "Why are you here?" "I live in this alley," the princess said as she took the cigarette from the boss. "Live in Fangjia Hutong?" Chen Lian recalled it for a while, and then suddenly remembered the classic scene of the princess that he saw in the newspaper 2 days ago. This is also the reason why courtyards are so cheap now. They are really inconvenient to live in. The restrooms are all public toilets, and bathing is also very troublesome. So now many people are thinking about selling their courtyards to buy apartments, or selling their courtyards and going abroad. But when he thought of the princess filling the chamber pot, Chen Lian found it quite funny. Do Wei was quite willing to do so. Seeing Chen Lian's strange expression, the princess also knew what he was thinking, and said angrily, "Laugh if you want to." Chen Lian couldn't help but laugh twice, and bubbles popped out of the Coke in his hand. The princess opened the cigarette, took out one and held it in her mouth. She rolled her eyes at Chen Lian and said, "Is it that funny? You haven't drunk it before. To put it another way, I'm sorry, as long as you are a big singer, the contrast is really huge." Chen Lian stopped laughing and said. The princess took out a cigarette from the cigarette case and handed it to Chen Lian. She crossed her arms and took a puff of the cigarette before saying, "Did you just say you were looking at the house? Buy or rent?" "Of course I bought it." Chen Lian lit the cigarette, then looked at the princess and asked, "Do you know if anyone here wants to sell a house with a larger yard? Why did you buy a courtyard? Don't you dislike pouring chamber pots?" The princess took the opportunity to stab Chen Lian. Chen Lian choked, exhaled a puff of smoke and said, "Saihewan is cheap." "It's indeed cheap." The princess nodded in agreement, and then said, "I haven't heard of anyone selling a house nearby. I'll ask you about it later." Chen Lian nodded casually, drank all the coke in the bottle, and returned the bottle to the boss. When the princess saw Chen Lian, she always recalled the time they met in Xiangjiang, and suddenly said with some itching, "Is my brother also in the capital? Let's play mahjong together in the evening." Chen Lian, why do I feel that the princess and Leslie Chung are a perfect match, two mahjong ghosts? Are you there? The princess asked, shaking Chen Lian's arm. Here, he happened to have an appointment for a card game tonight. Chen Lian took out his phone and said, "I'm calling to see if there is anyone available." The princess also thought of something, took out her phone and walked to the other side to make a call as well. A few minutes later, the two met again after making a phone call. Chen Lian spoke first. "It just so happened that one of the three was missing. I originally made an appointment with director Yu Rentai, but he was temporarily busy." The princess immediately asked curiously, "Who is the other one?" "Wu Qianlian, the heroine of the movie we are currently cooperating with," Chen Lian explained, and then asked, "We have an appointment to go to Maxim's together tonight, will you go?" "Go. I told Do Wei that we were going to play cards in the evening." "I'll treat you tonight," the princess said proudly, raising her thin eyebrows. Chen Lian gave the princess a thumbs up and said, "The boss is awesome. Maxim is walking." At the entrance of Fangjia Hutong, the princess drove Chen Lian in her Mercedes-Benz and couldn't help complaining, "Why don't you have a driver's license in the mainland?" Chen Lian looked at the princess who was driving and said, "Driving is so tiring. Wouldn't it be nice to have a beautiful woman as a driver?" The princess turned her head and glanced at Chen Lian, complaining, "You really don't look like a man from the capital." Fortunately, a capital city was added, otherwise Chen Lian would have to show the princess what it means to be a man and dig a ditch for your car. "How long will you stay back in the capital this time?" Chen Lian asked, changing the topic of men. The princess drove back and said, "I will return to Xiangjiang next month. The new album is ready to be released." So fast Chen Lian paused and said, "I also want to learn how to sing from you. I have been laughed at by my brother these days." Learning to sing, the princess looked at the traffic and asked, "Why is he laughing at you? Do you want to be a singer?" "What kind of singer am I? I don't have the energy," Chen Lian said, and then explained the movie Singing in the Midnight, and also highlighted how Leslie Chung made fun of himself because of his singing ability. After hearing this, the princess couldn't help laughing, and then said, "You two have a really good relationship, but it's probably a bit difficult for you to surpass him. You can just sing a line and I'll listen to it to see how your talent is." Chen Lian didn't hesitate. After thinking for a moment, he sang the princess's famous song, "A Woman Easily Injured." When the princess heard her song being sung by Chen Lian, the corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. It was too strange for a man to sing about a woman who is easily hurt. However, Chen Lian's voice is very nice, and his musicality is also good, but his technique and breath are a bit lagging behind, and he is much worse than professional singers. After Chen Lian finished singing, the princess commented, "You have a good talent. If you study hard, it is not difficult to be a singer. But your voice is relatively deep, and I can't teach you." "Well, I just said that I have no intention of actually learning to sing," Chen Lian said with a smile, then turned to look at the princess and said, "I didn't get to see your concert in Xiangjiang last time, so I'll sing a song now. I like it very much. This song belongs to you." The princess glanced at Chen Lian under her sunglasses, hesitated for a moment, and then sang softly. "As people get drunker, the night gets deeper. How close we are at this moment, the contradictions become deeper. My heart that was once broken allows you to be close to me today." I don't know if it's because she has been with Do Wei for a long time, but the princess's singing skills are much better than those of the past 2 years, and her style is more obvious. The feeling of singing now is much better than the albums of the past 2 years. Chen Lian couldn't help but tap his fingers lightly on his knees. The delicate and ethereal sound echoed in the small space of the car, which was particularly beautiful. After the princess finished singing, Chen Lian couldn't help but said, "You sang so well. I really want to take you home and use you as a human record player." "Princess, what nonsense are you talking about? Don't think that just because I'm handsome and talented, I won't be angry." Chen Lian turned his head and glanced at the silent princess, thinking that she was angry, and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I was just kidding." "It's okay." The princess glanced at Chen Lian under her sunglasses, then cleared her throat and said, "If you like my song so much, I'll give you some records next time, so that you won't have to try and arrest me. Go home." Seeing that the princess was not angry, Chen Lian smiled and said, "Haha, just kidding, your fans probably have the same idea." "I've never heard that from my fans." The princess parked the car and glared at Chen Lian before saying, "We're here, get out of the car." Chen Lian looked at the princess's feigned anger, smiled, opened the car door and got out. Maxim's is very lively at night, with many people coming to eat, and many people coming to hang out. Almost all rock music players in the capital come here, and this is their base camp. As soon as Chen Lian and the princess entered, they saw Song Huigui greeting guests at the door. She would come up and say a few words to almost everyone who came in. When Song Huigui saw Chen Lian coming in, he obviously still remembered him and asked with a smile, "Long time no see. Your art exhibition in France was very successful. I have heard about it in the capital. You are a new artist from the East. I have several friends in Paris. You even called me to inquire about your situation. You are a new artist. It's not like you don't know what's going on in the art world, but I still have to thank you for your help. Otherwise, I wouldn't have cooperated with Jifa." Chen Lian said politely, facing this artist in the capital. Well-connected ladies in the industry are respected. Song Huigui smiled indifferently, not feeling that he had helped Chen Lian much. He turned to look at the princess beside him, and then said with some surprise, "Jingguan, you are here too. Sorry, I almost didn't recognize you just now." The princess took off the sunglasses on her face, hugged Song Huigui and said, "Come to eat with friends." Song Huigui really has a wide network of contacts. It seems that there is no famous person in the circle that she doesn't know, especially everyone who plays music knows her. Song Huigui let go of the princess, glanced at Chen Lian, a strange look flashed in his eyes, and then said, "I didn't expect you two to know each other. Didn't Do Wei come?" The princess shook her head and said, "He went drinking with his friends." Chen Lian, who had been watching the two of them from the side, keenly caught Song Huigui's strange eyes, and felt helpless. Is it a woman's nature to gossip and have random thoughts? Chen Lian did not let them continue chatting and interrupted, "Boss Song, is Zhang Guorong here?" "We're already here, just inside." "I'll take you there," Song Huigui said with a smile. Song Huigui led the two of them into the restaurant, with the princess and Chen Lian following behind. Looking at Song Huigui's back, the princess asked quietly next to Chen Lian, "What's going on with the Paris art exhibition you just mentioned? Didn't I hear that you were participating in the national art exhibition in Beijing before? Why did you go to Paris again?" Chen Lian glanced at the curious princess and said, "You said you were coming to the national art exhibition to see my paintings, but you didn't come either." "I didn't have time at the time. I held 17 concerts in a row and rested in Xiangjiang for a long time after the concert," the princess explained in a low voice, then took Chen Lian's arm and asked curiously, "What on earth is going on with that art exhibition? Why are you holding an art exhibition in Paris? Are the emerging artists so powerful?" The princess felt that she needed to get to know Chen Lian again. How could he become so great after not seeing him for a few months and become a cutting-edge artist? Looking at the curious eyes of the princess, Chen Lian explained helplessly, "This thing is just like marketing in the entertainment industry. It's not as powerful as you think. Artists also need to be praised, otherwise how can people who buy my paintings resell and make money? After listening to Chen Lian's explanation, the princess nodded as if she had some understanding. Then she looked at Chen Lian's indifferent expression and said, "If someone praises you, it means you have potential. Otherwise, why would so many painters praise you? If nothing else, in China, there are several painters who can go to Paris to hold art exhibitions. By the way, your painting was sold. How much did it cost? No wonder you want to look at the house today," the princess said suddenly. "It's not much. If you don't make money from your records, it's only a few million yuan," Chen Lian replied with a smile. Then he saw Zhang Guorong in the booth who was talking very much, and he quickly stepped forward and said, "You guys are here. It's so early, doesn't it end at 6 o'clock? The princess looked at Chen Lian's back, and suddenly felt that this man was so good. "What do you mean, only a few million yuan?" Zhang Guorong, who heard Chen Lian's voice in the booth, raised his head, crossed his legs, and looked at him with a cigarette in his hand and said comfortably, "Director Yu is not Director Cheng, so it is normal to finish work early." Director Cheng was invisibly disliked again, but he was really slow. They will definitely be asked to go back for reshoots in the second half of this year. Sorry for updating so late, there is still one chapter left, I will update it later. My ex-girlfriend suddenly came to me tonight and I am sorry for wasting time. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 126. Chapter 126-124. I seem to have moved on. Maxim's is very lively at night, and the music in the restaurant is no longer piano music. Kui Jian, who has been famous for a long time, stood on the small stage holding a guitar and singing rock and roll. This is the representative figure of Chinese rock. When the three Magic Rocks went to Xiangjiang to perform, everyone was touring abroad. In the 1980s, I sang nothing during the global live broadcast of the opening ceremony of the Seoul Olympics. He will also go on tour in the United States this year, and he is also highly praised internationally. This is the person who truly represents Chinese rock music going abroad. Speaking of this person, the most gossipy thing about Chen Lian is that Kui Jian is Song Huigui's son-in-law. Song Huigui is so friendly to rock and roll, so it must be Kui Jian's influence. How else would a French restaurant do rock music every night? Chen Lian listened to Kui Jian singing Eggs Under the Red Flag, glanced sideways at the princess and asked, "What do you think compared with your Do Wei?" The princess was stunned for a moment, and said with a somewhat unnatural expression, "It's hard to say between the two styles, but this song doesn't feel as good as his previous ones. Indeed, it feels like the new Long March has not yet been completed." Chen Lian nodded in approval, not liking the Egg Under the Red Flag very much. Leslie Chung liked the song very much, and his unstoppable applause matched the lively atmosphere in the restaurant. Wu Jianlian was also very excited. Mainland rock music allowed her to see a different musical power. Vigorous wildness is full of power. It is very different from the soft love songs popular in Wanwan and Xiangjiang. Wu Jianlian drank a lot of wine and was very excited and swayed with Zhang Guorong. Most people know Wu Jianlian because of movies and TV series. People who don't know about Wu Jianlian don't know that Wu Jianlian is also a singer and sings very well. Looking at Zhang Guorong and Wu Jianlian, who were overly excited, Chen Lian said to the princess, "I guess I won't be able to play cards tonight. These two feel drunk." "You drank a lot and your face is red," the princess said, looking at the blush on Chen Lian's face. Chen Lian picked up the cup and took another sip and said, "This is just a little, it's still too early to drink too much." Looking at Chen Lian's still clear eyes, the princess knew that he hadn't drunk too much. She turned to look at Kui Jian, who had just changed the track on the stage, and suddenly said, "Don't you like rock music? Ask Kui Jian to teach you." "No," Chen Lian immediately refused, "I like listening to rock music, not singing." "You are quite difficult to maintain," the princess teased, then remembered that Chen Lian could also sing his own songs, so she approached him and asked, Then how come you can sing my songs? I like it, I'm your fan, Chen Lian said with a smile, and added jokingly, the kind of fan who wants to take you home and sing exclusively for me. Abnormal, the princess cursed, but she felt in her heart that this was the best comment. Zhang Guorong, who had been high for a while, sat down again and looked at Chen Lian and the princess and said, "What are you talking about? Come and have a drink." "Still drinking? If you drink any more, you won't be able to play cards," Chen Lian said, looking at Zhang Guorong, who was already a little drunk. Before Zhang Guorong could answer, Wu Jianlian joined in the fun and raised her glass and shouted, "Drink! No more playing cards. Let's drink." Looking at Wu Qianlian's red face, Chen Lian knew that this person had really drunk too much. He really couldn't play cards tonight, so he had no choice but to turn the card game into a drinking game. He raised his glass and clinked it with them and shouted, "Drink! Have fun! Don't come back until you're drunk. Yeah! Have fun." When several people at the table next to him heard Chen Lian's shout, they also raised their glasses and shouted to join in the fun. The whole restaurant is in a state of frenzy. It's Labor Day holiday. You don't have to go to work, so don't go wild. If your wanton youth is not wasted now, when will it be wasted? You can't wait until you get your pension to remember that you haven't acted wildly yet. Impetuousness was the main theme tonight. Everyone was impatient to drink one glass after another, as if the wine would be gone if they drank too slowly, and the wonderful night would be incomplete. At around 11 o'clock, Chen Lian helped Zhang Guorong out of the restaurant, smelling of alcohol. The driver who had been waiting outside saw him and immediately ran over to help him on the other side. Chen Lian glanced at him and asked, "Are you the master who picked us up at the airport that day?" The driver nodded quickly and said, "Yes, I will be responsible for picking up Mr. Zhang Guorong during this period." Chen Lian nodded, then handed Zhang Guorong into his hand and said, "Thank you for your hard work. I have 2 more to give away. You can give them away together." The driver took one look and said, "Ms. Wu Jianlian also has a dedicated driver. She just went there for convenience and will be here soon." Chen Lian turned his head and glanced at Wu Jianlian, who was being held unconscious by a waiter. He didn't expect this person to be treated so well, so he said to the driver, "You are all arranged by Beijing Film Studio. Are you working as a driver in the factory?" The driver nodded to understand what Chen Lian meant. He took out his work permit from his pocket and handed it to Chen Lian and said, "This is my work permit." Chen Lian took it and looked at it carefully, and then returned it to him and said, "Thank you for your hard work. Brother and Miss Wu will give it to you. I will give the other one myself." The princess was also drunk, and her walking was a little unsteady. When another driver who went to the convenience store came back, Chen Lian looked at the ID as usual before handing Wu Jianlian to him and asked him to call him immediately after sending him to the hotel. "It's not far from here to the Jingcheng Hotel. It can take up to 15 minutes. When you get to the hotel, use the front desk phone to call me back." Chen Lian looked at the driver and warned. Although the driver was unhappy, he still smiled and agreed, and proactively said, "Miss Wu's assistant is at the hotel. I'll call her and ask her to come over first to ensure there won't be any problems." Seeing the driver's cooperation, Chen Lian took out a cigarette from his pocket and handed it over and said, "Brother, don't mind, please be considerate. Thank you for your hard work." "It should be." The driver took the cigarette and smiled. After solving the problem of Zhang Guorong and Wu Jianlian returning, Chen Lian was finally free to think about how to send the princess back. Chen Lian walked up to her and took out her phone from her pocket. He looked through it and found Do Wei's number and dialed it. Do. The phone rang several times but no one answered it. Chen Lian frowned and hung up and dialed again. He called several times in a row but didn't answer it. Chen Lian has some pain in his head. Do Wei must have been too drunk. The princess said before that he went drinking with his friends. Either he was too drunk or none of these people are reliable. Chen Lian looked at the drunken princess, patted her and said, "Wake up, what number is your home in Fang's alley? I'll send it back to you." Huh, the princess raised her head and shook her head, sobering up a little. She reached out and grabbed Chen Lian's clothes to barely stand still before muttering, "What did you just say?" Chen Lian held Fei Wang's arm with one hand and asked again, "Where is your home? I will take you back." "Fang Jiehu," the princess bent over and retched midway through the sentence. Chen Lian was so frightened that he almost threw her out. Fortunately, his sense prevailed and he just hid aside. Otherwise, it would be on the headlines tomorrow. Ahem. "Water, give me water." The princess grabbed Chen Lian's hand and patted him and said. Chen Lian looked at the princess with a headache and asked the waiter to get a bottle of water from the store. 5 minutes later, the princess woke up a lot after drinking water and washing her face. She looked at Chen Lian with some embarrassment and asked, "I didn't vomit on you, did I?" Chen Lian shook his head, and then said helplessly, "Sober up now. Give me your home address and I will take you back. Don't you know how to drive? And you've been drinking." The princess exhaled and rubbed her temples. "Take a taxi, I hope you can get one, otherwise I will have to find someone to drive you back," Chen Lian said lightly, then looked at the deserted street, praying for a rhubarb. However, the reality was very helpless. Chen Lian and the princess waited for 10 minutes but did not find a taxi. There were too few taxis these days, and people rarely came here in the middle of the night. The only way to take a taxi was in front of the disco. He couldn't wait for the car and couldn't wait for the car. Chen Lian asked the princess to sit in the car first, and went to the restaurant to ask the waiter who had not yet got off work if he knew how to drive. After the princess sat in the car for a while, Chen Lian came back without anyone following her. After opening the car door and getting in, Chen Lian said to the princess, "No one knows how to drive. Those who can drive have already left." The princess leaned back on the seat, took a sip of water and said, "Wait a while. Let's go back when I wake up." "Forget it, I'll drive," Chen Lian said with a headache. "I hope there are no traffic police checking the car in the middle of the night." The princess turned her head and looked at Chen Lian and asked, "Can you drive?" "That's right," Chen Lian replied uncertainly. He hadn't driven a manual transmission for many years, and he hadn't driven a car for more than 2 years after traveling through time. He wasn't sure whether he could still do it now. "Then you try," the princess sitting in the back seat asked tentatively. "Try it?" Chen Lian pushed open the car door and came to the driver's seat, recalling in his mind how to turn on the automatic transmission. Twist the key in the ignition, hit the brake, hit the clutch and put it in gear? Chen Lian thought about it for a while and started to try. The princess sitting in the back seat looked at Chen Lian's clumsy movements and said angrily, "Please pull him down quickly, I don't want to die so early." Chen Lian, "So we must find a driver. Driving is the most annoying thing." The two of them sat in the car in silence for a while, and then the princess suddenly said, "Sit in the back and let me lean on you, I feel dizzy." This may be Chen Lian's only role. He can't even drive a car. It's really embarrassing. The princess tilted her head and leaned on Chen Lian's shoulder. After a while, she asked, "Which of my songs do you like best? Split, Fall, and Legend?" Chen Lian suddenly stopped mid-sentence. His mind was dizzy. Why did he talk about these two songs? But the princess had already heard it. She raised her head and looked at Chen Lian, shaking her hand and saying, "What is this? You are still driving like this? When did I ever sing these songs?" Chen Lian twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "My head is dizzy. I remembered it wrong." The princess snorted, then closed her eyes and leaned back on the chair and said, "She also said that she is a fan of mine. She can even remember the songs I have sung. But these songs must be very good, otherwise how could you blurt it out?" "Yeah, it sounds good," Chen Lian replied, acknowledging that he had remembered it wrong. Whose song is it? Sing it to me. I do not know how to sing. Singing, is this how you treat your idols? Chen Lian, who couldn't resist the princess, started singing anyway. You don't want to talk too much. You want to indulge. There is nothing to be afraid of and nothing to worry about. You have to enjoy the pain, hesitate to fall, and cannot control the temptation, so you refuse to be lonely. You are not wrong, because no one has done it right. You feel at ease. Then you fall. Come, come, I will accompany you. The princess looked at Chen Lian's profile as he sang softly. The red light outside the car shone on his profile, like an addictive poppy. Is this song called Fallen? I don't remember anyone singing it. Whose song is it? The princess felt like this song was tailor-made for herself. This song was more suitable for her than her previous songs, like Sing to Your Heart. Chen Lian hesitated and said, Yours. There was sudden silence in the car. The princess knew that this was not her song, and she subconsciously thought that it was written by Chen Lian for herself, but she couldn't believe that a non-professional could write such a good song. It felt ridiculous. Chen Lian knew that this was the princess's song, but he couldn't say it was her future song, nor could he say it was someone else's. He could only remain silent. At this moment, he suddenly realized that his every word and deed might have an impact on the current world. Produce an unpredictable impact. Did you write it to me? The princess asked, looking into Chen Lian's eyes, but her tone was very firm. Chen Lian was silent and didn't know how to answer. Is this considered plagiarism? Still being misunderstood in front of the real owner. Seeing that Chen Lian didn't answer, the princess tilted her head and leaned against the car window, looking at the flashing traffic lights at the intersection. The thoughts in her mind were like a ball of paste, so thick and chaotic that she couldn't tell where she was now. Worried that the misunderstanding would continue to grow, Chen Lian coughed and asked, Are you sober? Can you drive back? The princess rubbed her temples, sat up straight and said, Almost. Then go back and rest early. Chen Lian planned to end the current inexplicable state as soon as possible. It was really embarrassing. Good. The princess said as she opened the car door, got out of the car and came to the driver's seat, expertly started the ignition, and then slowly moved forward on the empty street. The princess drove for more than 20 minutes for a distance of 5 kilometers, but finally arrived at Fangjiahutong safely. After the car stopped, Chen Lian opened the door and turned to the princess and said, Go back and have a good rest. Goodbye. Goodbye. The princess looked at Chen Lian's profile and said. Chen Lian got out of the car and closed the door. He glanced at the princess through the car window, turned around and left. His head was a little dizzy, and he felt like he had stepped on cotton tonight, which was a bit weird. The princess sat in the car and looked at Chen Lian's back through the rearview mirror. She didn't look away from the rearview mirror until his figure disappeared into the alley, and she slumped on the seat and breathed a sigh of relief. What a wonderful night. I met a wonderful person. You have to enjoy the pain, hesitate to fall, and cannot control the temptation, so you refuse to be lonely. You are not wrong, because no one has done it right. You feel at ease. Then you fall. Come, come, I will accompany you. The princess gently hummed the song Chen Lian had just sung, until she finally looked at herself reflected in the car window and said softly, I seem to have moved on. This is to make up for yesterday. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 127. Chapter 127-125. Chen Lian, I really didn't want to get involved. In the studio of Beijing Film Studio, Chen Lian gently brushed off the dust on his gown, carefully smoothed his hair, looked at his expression in the small mirror, and then slightly lowered his raised eyebrows. The light in his eyes was also blocked by his slightly closed eyelids, and even his straight shoulders were slightly slouched. All the sharp edges in his body were hidden. He was no longer confident and flamboyant, and he lost the amazing feeling that made him look so stunning at first glance. He looked like an ordinary little actor. The weather in early May was still a bit cool, but it was still a bit sultry even wearing a long gown. Chen Lian slowly exhaled and put a black scarf around his neck. The bookish air on his body immediately became much stronger. The character of Wei Qing is not a wanton person who dares to love and hate. He has his own dreams, innocence, and a bit of cowardice. He looks weak. Chen Lian's eyes were as gentle as a dove's when he looked at people at this time. Yu Rentai, who had been observing Chen Lian and watching him adjust his condition, couldn't help but said, "You are really amazing. I was worried that you were too sharp." "No need to worry at all now." Facing Rentai's compliment, Chen Lian raised a shy blue smile on his lips, and said with joy and shyness in his eyes, "Thank you, director." Seeing Chen Lian like this, Yu Rentai exclaimed in his heart, "Good guy, he entered the state too quickly, and he became Wei Qing." "Don't worry about Lian's acting skills," Zhang Guorong also said next to him. At this time, he was wearing a black hooded windbreaker and special effects makeup on his face. Half of his face was burnt and looked hideous. "Scary, but not scary." "That's good, let's get ready to start," Yu Rentai said with a smile. Chen Lian nodded and was about to start when a field attendant ran over to him and said, "Teacher Chen, your phone is ringing." Chen Lian paused for a moment, took a look at the cell phone handed over by the field attendant, and then quickly answered the call and said, "Sorry, I'm working. I'll call you back later." "Ah." Then before the person on the other end of the phone finished speaking, the phone was hung up. Chen Lian turned off his phone, handed it to the field assistant and said, "Keep it safe for me, thank you." "Okay, Teacher Chen." In the Fangjia Hutong not far from the Beijing film studio, the princess looked at the phone that was hung up in her hand. She looked a little depressed but did not continue to dial. She picked up a few pieces of collected housing information and chuckled. In the studio, Chen Lian readjusted himself and did not think about why the princess called him. Last night, he said some things he shouldn't have said and sang some songs he shouldn't have sung under the stimulation of alcohol. In the end, the way the princess looked at him was wrong. Chen Lian regretted it so much now. Why couldn't he control his promiscuity? He must not touch a woman who has a boyfriend or a husband. This is the principle. Green people are always green. Chen Lian didn't want to do this kind of thing. "Lian, are you okay?" Yu Rentai shouted while sitting in front of the monitor. Chen Lian put away his divergent thoughts, made a gesture, and immersed himself in the character. Start. In the Grand Theatre, the originally gorgeous stage has become desolate and dilapidated due to the ravages of fire and time. The huge glass roof above the stage is also covered with thick dust, and the gloomy sky cannot penetrate the glass to illuminate the stage. The owner of the troupe who rented this place opened the door of the theatre, and countless dust blew in. The whole theatre looked like a huge garbage dump. Such a desolate and gloomy scene made everyone couldn't help but retreat and didn't want to go in. Only Wei Qing looked at this huge theatre and couldn't help but start to imagine the glory of this place in his mind. His eyes seemed to have penetrated through time and saw the sparkling stage. Wei Qing looked at the rows of seats, imagining that the place was full of audiences. He couldn't help but feel yearning in his expression. When he walked onto the stage and faced the entire audience, he was stunned and didn't care about the stage at all. Debris scattered on the floor and dust blowing in the face. Wei Qing walked to the middle of the stage and looked at the empty auditorium below. He couldn't help but raise his arm slightly, and then restrained himself because of his young and gentle temperament. Wei Qing took a slight step forward and leaned forward slightly, like a curtain call after a performance. At this moment, Wei Qing seemed to hear countless applause and cheers in his ears, and seemed to see the audience standing up and cheering for him. I also want to perform here and become an actor on this stage. Wei Qing finally couldn't help but raise his arms and head and look at the glass top of the stage, as if he saw a spotlight shining on him. At this moment, Wei Qing's gentle temperament and the timidity in his eyes disappeared, replaced by strong desire. "Pull up the camera, close up," Yu Rentai immediately urged, zooming in on Chen Lian's performance in the camera. Looking at Chen Lian's performance in the camera, Yu Rentai was extremely surprised. A character who was not outstanding in itself, at this time, under Chen Lian's interpretation, actually enriched so many layers, bringing out the rich and delicate emotions in this small character. Give it a good performance. There is nothing to say about this performance, nor is there anything to say about the character creation. Yu Rentai was a little excited. The main focus of the movie was on Zhang Guorong, and the other characters were not important. Most of them were tool men. Originally, the scene was not like this. It was Chen Lian who took the initiative to approach him and propose to change the character's appearance so that this tool man could have his own splendor. Now it seems that the changes are really good. Yu Rentai felt that this character who served as a link in the movie was not just a tool at this moment, but also a flesh and blood character who could add a lot of color to the movie. It's true that people cannot be judged by their appearance. No wonder a great director like Director Chen, who has won the Palme d'Or, would use Chen Lian. He is really capable. Not only Yu Rentai was surprised on the set, but others were also surprised by Chen Lian's delicate performance. A simple raising of hands, two different performances, advanced the character's inner emotions layer by layer, and the character stood firm in the first scene. Bull. Wu Jianlian was also on the set. At this time, she pursed her lips and had many thoughts in her heart. Compared with Chen Lian's performance, her previous performance was like a vase with a glossy surface. It's not that it was not good, but it didn't have such a deep level. The characters were not so delicate. Zhang Guorong also feels this way. The roles he has played in the past 2 or 3 years have been quite homogeneous, and his performance of the characters has also become somewhat superficial. Lian taught me a lesson. Zhang Guorong sighed with emotion, and then found a corner to think about the role again. "Okay, click," Yu Rentai shouted while sitting on a chair with a walkie-talkie. The stewards immediately came out and shouted click. Standing on the stage, Chen Lian put down his arms and was still in a daze. Where was the applause and where was the audience? Oh, the audience was behind the camera. Chen Lian's body collapsed slightly and returned to that soft feeling, as if the person who was so high-spirited on the stage just now had never existed. Yu Rentai waved his hand and called Chen Lian over, and said with a smile, "Lian, you gave me a surprise today, haha. Get ready and start the next scene right away." Chen Lian nodded silently, with a gentle smile that looked easy to bully. Wu Jianlian looked at Chen Lian's smiling face, and a fire ignited in her heart. She couldn't be compared no matter what, otherwise she, the heroine, would be too shameless. Chen Lian felt the fighting spirit in Wu Jianlian's eyes. He turned his head and smiled sheepishly at her. He really didn't want to take the test. He couldn't help it with his strength. There is no justice. You still maintain your character outside of the scene. Wu Jianlian was depressed and angry for a while. She couldn't maintain her character outside the play. The characters in the play were all crazy now. How could she maintain it? Chen Lian didn't care what Wu Jianlian was thinking, he was just thinking about how to act in the next scene. Maintaining the character's status outside the play is actually not as in-depth as imagined. It's just that Chen Lian's own personality conflicts with the character of Wei Qing, so he uses this method to get close to the character. The status is just similar, the inside is still Chen Lian himself. "Okay, get ready and start the next scene," Yu Rentai greeted and started to prepare for the next scene. Chen Lian tidied up his clothes, put on his scarf again, looked at the props for his protective equipment, took a deep breath, and the performance began. Wei Qing stood on the wooden stairs covered with dust and cobwebs, looking at the grand theater from top to bottom. He was so shocked by this once magnificent building that he lost his mind. Wei Qing took a step forward to get a clear view of the stands opposite, but he didn't expect that the rotten stairs were broken by a foot, and Wei Qing suddenly fell down. At this moment, a pair of old hands grabbed Wei Qing. Wei Qing hung in the air in panic and fear, but his eyes were still attracted by this grand theater. "Ka, you Rentai!" immediately shouted loudly, "pull people up quickly, be sure to pay attention to safety." Chen Lian, who was still hanging in the air, breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the click. He grabbed the edge of the stairs with his left hand and pushed himself up through the big hole in the stairs. The staff nearby were speechless before they could use any force to pull Chen Lian up. How could he come up so easily? He climbed up with one hand, which was a bit too much for someone with good physical fitness. After Chen Lian stood firm, he took off his scarf and shook it, then patted the dust off his body, then turned to look at several staff members, smiled and went downstairs. With his skills, he wouldn't take such a situation to heart, and he didn't feel there was any danger. Even if you really fall from above to the first floor, there are still cushions below, so you won't die. "Lian, you have good skills," Yu Rentai said with a smile, and then asked curiously, "Have you practiced before?" "Well, I have been practicing for a few years." Chen Lian nodded and said, "Director, don't forget me in future martial arts movies. I really want to fight on the screen." "Haha, I'll definitely do it if I have the chance," Yu Rentai replied with a smile, and then said, "Get ready for the next scene." Chen Lian nodded. His subsequent scenes were more concentrated, and they were mostly in this theater. Naturally, he had to finish filming early. Renting this studio for a day was not cheap. When Wei Qing fell from upstairs, he was saved by Lao Ma, the janitor of the theater. He was full of curiosity about this theater and wanted to know about its glorious past. In the evening, Wei Qing found Lao Ma and heard from him the past story of this theater and the poignant love story of Song Danpin and Yun Yan. Wei Qing sympathized with the two people in the story, who fell in love but couldn't be together, and ended up dying and going crazy. The next day, the leader of the troupe asked everyone to start cleaning up the place, trying to clean up the place as soon as possible, and then start buying tickets for the show. For a wandering troupe, survival is always the first priority. After working hard for a few days, everyone in the troupe cleaned the theater again. At this time, everyone looked at such a desolate and uninhabited theater. After being cleaned up by themselves, a burst of fire ignited in their hearts, and they began to hope that the troupe's performance would be a big hit. It's just that the reality is very cruel. The small theater troupe has limited skills and no good scripts. Compared with Song Danpin 10 years ago, it is completely different. The audience present was disappointed with the performance, and many people even dozed off. After several days in a row, the tickets for the theater could no longer be sold. The entire troupe became disheartened and wanted to give up. The leader could hardly afford to pay the daily rent. Everyone wanted to give up and go to the next place to continue performing. Only Wei Qing was very confident and didn't want to leave this theater. He wanted to be like Song Danking. Everyone in the troupe had taken a rest at night, and Wei Qing was practicing singing on the stage alone. Suddenly, a piece of glass fell from the top of the stage and broke in front of Wei Qing. A very beautiful singing voice came from the attic. Wei Qing couldn't hold back his curiosity and wanted to see who sang the song. There should be no one in the troupe who sang better than him, but this singing voice was much better than him. Wei Qing lit a candle and followed the singing to the attic again. In the attic, Wei Qing listened to the extremely beautiful singing, and a deep envy flashed in his heart. It would be great if he could sing so well. The curiosity and longing in his heart made him temporarily forget his fear, and just walked towards the place where the singing appeared. Wei Qing held the candle in his hand and walked towards the attic. He was curious about the singing coming from here. The dark attic was full of spider webs, and burned wood and debris were scattered everywhere. Wei Qing carefully explored the attic, his steps very light and slow as he stepped on the loose floorboards, making a squeaking sound that echoed in the attic. The breeze blew, and the shabby curtains swayed gently, like lonely souls who died unjustly. Wei Qing's steps became even slower, taking every step very carefully, and his eyes were only within the scope of the candle light, as if he was worried that something would happen. See the monster in the dark. When he stepped onto the attic, he saw a man shrouded in a black cloak, and the singing stopped suddenly. Zhang Guorong, who plays Song Danpin, has his back to Chen Lian. It seems that he can feel his aura, and he is very serious, standing there quietly, brewing his own emotions and strength. Wei Qing looked at the voice and asked with some fear, "Who are you?" The man under the cloak turned his back to Wei Qing and said in a loud voice, "I am Song Danpin." When Wei Qing heard this, he took a step back in fright and shouted in surprise, "Weren't you burned to death by fire?" "My life or death has nothing to do with you," Song Danpin interrupted Wei Qing with an angry roar, and then asked coldly, "Do you want to become famous?" Wei Qing swallowed, and the emotions accumulated in the past few days were instantly ignited, and he immediately said, "I think." Hearing this answer, Song Danpin showed a smile, turned around and threw a script towards Wei Qing. Wei Qing caught the script and listened to Song Danpin saying that he wanted to teach him. The smile on his face could no longer be concealed. He also wanted to be like Song Danpin. Let this theater regain its due glory. Let the audience cheer for you. Ka, you ran from the other side of the attic shouted at the right time, always feeling that something was wrong with the scene just now. Guorong, Lian, come here Yurentai shouted. Chen Lian frowned slightly, then walked towards Yurentai. Zhang Guorong also lifted up his cloak and came over at this time, and asked, "Director, what's wrong?" Yurentai looked away from the monitor, looked at Leslie Chung and Chen Lian and said, "The scene just now felt a bit wrong. You two should watch it again." Chen Lian and Zhang Guorong looked at each other, walked around behind the monitor, and watched all the shots of the scene just now. After reading it, Zhang Guorong was the first to speak, "My rhythm is wrong, it's a bit too fast. It seems that I am angry instead of carefully planning to attract Wei Qing." Chen Lian was silent and didn't speak. He thought so in his heart. Zhang Guorong's roar just now seemed like he was angry because his fig leaf had been lifted. His emotions were a bit too much. After hearing this, Yurentai smiled and said, "So that's it, let's do it again." Listening to Yurentai's words, Chen Lian glanced at him and felt that either he didn't know what was wrong, or he wanted Zhang Guorong to discover it by himself. It seemed that every director had his own special habits. After this, Zhang Guorong simply adjusted his state and started again. This was the first scene between Chen Lian and Zhang Guorong in the movie. Zhang Guorong didn't want to be compared, so he tried too hard. In fact, his worries were completely unnecessary. No matter which aspect of the role you look at, Song Danpin will always be the protagonist in the shot. No matter how good Chen Lian's performance is, he can't take the audience's attention away from him. This is the inherent limitation of the character. How can a character who is like a tool man be attractive to a protagonist with a strong tragic color? Zhang Guorong's performance was much more calm the second time, and he portrayed Song Danpin very well, and the mystery and pathos were vividly performed. After finishing work in the evening, Leslie Chung looked at Chen Lian who was taking off his makeup leisurely, and couldn't help but kicked him and said, "Why are you acting so hard? Do you know how I felt when I heard those lines of yours?" Chen Lian said while taking off his makeup, "I don't know. I was scared at first, but then when I heard that Song Danpin would help you become famous, I felt a very fanatical ambition in your voice and eyes, but it was not the kind of heroic ambition, It was a very pure and simple desire, which is consistent with the role of Wei Cheng. It fits perfectly. After Zhang Guorong finished speaking in one breath, he said with emotion, "You can play such a simple character so complex and humane, it's really." "What is it really?" Chen Lian turned his head and asked. "You really don't leave a way for people to survive. Didn't you see that Wu Jianlian hasn't been here for 2 or 3 days?" Zhang Guorong said in a low voice after finishing speaking. "I heard that I have been studying the script in the hotel these days. I'm afraid I won't meet you. I was suppressed during the show." Chen Lian. Why did it get rolled up? Our character itself is not outstanding, so that's why we work so hard. Why do you have a male protagonist and a female protagonist joining in the fun? The character itself is so outstanding, and you still work so hard. Why don't you leave a way for the small characters to survive? No. You have to work harder than them. Otherwise, the character of Wei Qing would really become a trap. There is another chapter of 4000, which will be updated later. Part-time players can only update it in the middle of the night. I cry to death. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 128. Chapter 128-126. Do you want to fall together? On the huge stage of the theater, Chen Lian sang Romeo and Juliet loudly, affectionately, and attentively. Lu Ling, who played Wei Qing's partner in the movie, was moved and a little bit laughing when she listened to Chen Lian's singing. What moved her was Chen Lian's dedication and performance, but what made her laugh was the broken tone of Chen Lian's singing. Haha. Lu Ling couldn't bear it anymore, waved her hands towards Chen Lian and said, I'm sorry, I really can't hold it in." As Lu Ling laughed, her laughter seemed to be contagious, and everyone on the set started laughing. Listening to everyone's laughter, Chen Lian also laughed helplessly. Then he looked at Lu Ling, who was laughing the most, and couldn't help but said, "Senior sister, I won't do it if you laugh again." "I'm sorry, my fault." Lu Ling covered her mouth to stop her smile, looked at Chen Lian apologetically and said, "You sang quite well, but there's no need to work so hard, the high notes were all broken." "Okay, I'll keep it tight." Chen Lian also knew that it was because of himself. He was so immersed in the acting that he was also very immersed in the singing. He completely forgot about the dubbing in the later stage. Yu Rentai also stood up at this time and said, "Let's rest for a while." Lu Ling and Lian need to adjust themselves. It is necessary to take proper rest and adjust. We have just experienced the laughter scene, and the laughter in everyone's hearts has not yet calmed down. Now if we continue to shoot, we will still laugh. Chen Lian sat on the edge of the stage, looking up at the top of the glass curtain. He turned to look at Lu Ling and asked, "Senior sister, are there many classes in the school?" Lu Ling is a sophomore student at Nortel. Her acting skills are pretty good, but she wasn't very famous later on. The role that Chen Lian impressed most about her was that of Zhu Sheiyang's mother in The Hidden Corner. It's a pity that Lu Ling was already old and beautiful at that time. Compared with her youthful beauty now, it is simply unimaginable. When Chen Lian looked at Lu Ling's young face, he would always think of Hidden Corners, and he felt very complicated in his heart. Lu Ling also bent down and sat next to Chen Lian, looked at his side face and said, "There aren't many classes, but you haven't even gone to class yet, and you still care about this issue." "I've heard about it, Teacher Li. From your class I complain every day." Ahem. Chen Lian choked on the dust and slapped his hand before saying, "Don't I have time? After the play is finished, I should be able to go back to school for 2 days." Lu Ling looked at Nortel's most mysterious junior student and couldn't help but sigh and said, "It's so irritating that people are so different from each other. You haven't even taken a class. How come you are so good at acting?" Chen Lian smiled and did not answer the question. If he did, it would make people feel like he was showing off. Lu Ling just expressed her feelings. Before she acted opposite Chen Lian, she didn't think it was anything. But after acting, she realized how suffocating the feeling of being crushed face to face was. Throwing it at you with just one look can knock you out of your mind for a long time without being able to catch it. Lu Ling still has too little experience, and her acting skills are quite good. At least Chen Lian seems to be much better than Su Talent in the same class as her. After chatting for a while, Lu Ling suddenly asked in a gossipy tone, "There have been rumors in school about you, Chen Myron, and Gong Li, is it true?" Chen Lian glanced at Lu Ling and said, "It's fake. Also, don't ask the person involved so stupidly in the future. I will hate you if you are petty." Lu Ling blushed when Chen Lian said it, smiled stupidly and said, "You are not a small-minded person, so I asked." "How do you know I'm not?" Chen Lian replied coldly. Lu Ling was dumbfounded when she saw Chen Lian, whose expression suddenly turned cold. She actually felt a little scared under Chen Lian's cold eyes. Looking at the dumbfounded Lu Ling, Chen Lian suppressed a smile and said, "Now you know you're afraid. Stop gossiping in the future. People in the entertainment industry are not as kind as you think." Looking at Chen Lian, whose expression suddenly became warm again, Lu Ling realized that she had been tricked by him, but she was not angry at all. Instead, she subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief, looked at Chen Lian and scolded, "You scared me to death. Luckily it was a joke, otherwise I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight." Chen Lian smiled and said, "I'll make your memory long and don't be so gossipy in the future." Lu Ling stuck out her tongue and quickly promised, "I know, Teacher Chen." "Teacher Chen, have you had a rest?" The steward suddenly ran over and said, "The director wants you to prepare for another one." "Okay, come on." Chen Lian sat up and patted the dust on his clothes and said. Lu Ling also stood up quickly and said, "I'm fine too." The floor manager didn't even look at Lu Ling and said to Chen Lian, "Okay, Teacher Chen, I'll go talk to the director." After the attendant left, Chen Lian turned to look at Lu Ling and said, "Did you see that? This is the entertainment industry." Lu Ling looked at the back of the field attendant and nodded with complicated emotions. It was much easier to reshoot once. Chen Lian consciously controlled his singing. Although his singing skills were not professional, it sounded good. Lu Ling did not laugh out loud this time, and the filming was completed smoothly. After taking a few more shots, Yu Rentai announced that it was time to call it a day. "Lian, you performed well today. You've worked hard these past few days. There won't be any scenes for you tomorrow, so have a good rest." Chen Lian nodded and said to Rentai, "Director, are the scenes in the studio almost finished?" "Yes, after finishing the filming in the studio, we will start shooting the outdoor scenes. The filming should be completed before the end of the month," Yu Rentai said with some worry. "The deadline given by the company is still too tight. You will have to work hard later." "It's 1 o'clock. It should be after," Chen Lian said politely. He changed his clothes and left. As soon as Chen Lian walked out of the gate of Beijing Film Studio, Lu Ling chased him from behind and shouted, "Teacher Chen! Wait for me!" Chen Lian stopped and looked back at Lu Ling and said, "Senior sister, why are you calling me Teacher Chen?" "The master is the teacher," Lu Ling explained with a smile and then asked, "Teacher Chen, do you have time in the evening? I would like to treat you to dinner." Looking at Lu Ling, who was a little nervous, Chen Lian said apologetically, "Sorry, I already have an appointment tonight. I'll treat you to dinner next time." Lu Ling was a little disappointed when she was rejected, but she still smiled and said, "Okay, I'll remember that." Chen Lian smiled and said, "Okay, we'll wait until filming is completed." Drop drop. Two car horns interrupted Chen Lian's words. He turned around and saw that it was the princess's car. Through the windshield, he could see the princess with short hair looking at him with sunglasses on. Chen Lian turned back to Lu Ling and said, "Sister, I'll leave first. I'll treat you to dinner when the filming is finished." "Okay, bye." Lu Ling waved her hand and watched Chen Lian walk towards a black Mercedes-Benz and get in. The distance was a little far, and Lu Ling couldn't see clearly who was driving, but she could tell it was a woman. It can't be Cheng Myron. She's very thin, so she shouldn't be Gong Li, Lu Ling muttered, and suddenly realized a key point. The woman who was rumored to be having an affair with Chen Lian is a big star. She, a young actor, would not be rejected if she invited him to dinner. That's strange. Whenever you invite a man to dinner, it depends on whether he is popular or not, Lu Ling said gloomily and left with sad steps. In the Mercedes-Benz, the princess took off her sunglasses and turned to look at Chen Lian, without starting the car, just looking straight at him. Chen Lian was so frightened when the princess saw him that he couldn't help but said, "Why are you suddenly looking for me today?" The princess put one hand on the steering wheel, tilted her head and looked at Chen Lian and asked, "I called you so many times, and you all said you were busy, so I came in person, otherwise I wouldn't see you as a busy person." "I'm filming, and I'm not just messing around with you," Chen Lian said with one hand on the car door switch. The princess hummed, then looked at Chen Lian's hand on the car door switch and said, "Why are you so nervous? Do you want to run away at any time?" Hearing what the princess said, Chen Lian laughed, took back his hand and said, "No, I'm used to the movements." If the princess is single and Chen Lian has locked the car door now, who would think of escaping? Take her home and let her sing every day. If you don't sing, you won't be given food. I have no other thoughts about Princess Chen Lian. I just like her singing voice. I have no thoughts about developing this legendary woman. The princess could see Chen Lian's alertness and caution, and said with some disappointment, "Why are you so guarded against me? You were not like this that night." "Hey! Don't talk nonsense. What do you mean I wasn't like this that night?" Chen Lian said speechlessly. "It's like there is something between us." "No," the princess asked back, then suddenly looked at Chen Lian closely and said, "Don't you want to take me home? You can do it now." Chen Lian looked at the princess who suddenly approached. He didn't expect that she would make such a bold statement, and said cautiously, "It's just a joke, don't do that." After hearing Chen Lian's words, the princess sat back again and said calmly, "I knew you didn't dare, otherwise you wouldn't have been avoiding me these days. You know I don't dare but you still ask. Is it because Do Wei and I are together?" The princess looked at Chen Lian and asked. Chen Lian was silent for a moment and said, "No, I don't have that special feeling for you. I just like to hear you sing." "Lie," the princess said decisively, then looked into Chen Lian's eyes and said, "What if I tell you that I broke up with him? Do you dare to take me home?" Chen Lian's unavoidable look represented his answer, and the car fell into silence for a while. The sky outside has become dark, and the moon has climbed out. The faint moonlight shines into the car, and it is so cold that it seems to condense the air into frost. The princess's slender fingers suddenly tapped the steering wheel and pressed the tape play button on the center console. The princess's ethereal and charming voice suddenly came from the speakers. "You have to enjoy the pain, hesitate to fall, and cannot control the temptation, so you refuse to be lonely. You are not wrong, because no one has done it right. You feel at ease. Then you fall. Come, come, I will accompany you." Chen Lian turned to look at the princess in surprise, not expecting that she had composed this song. "Do you want to fall together?" the princess asked softly. "Are we all going to fall together?" Chen Lian's answer is no. Why fall? Silence was Chen Lian's main theme tonight. The princess couldn't help but grab Chen Lian's hand and asked, "I broke up because of you, can't you take the initiative? What does your breakup have to do with me? Who knows whether what you said is true or false?" Chen Lian felt that he was very innocent and had done nothing. The princess laughed angrily at Chen Lian's words and couldn't help but say, "You are really the most shameless man I have ever seen. It's not easy to stimulate generals. I really don't have that feeling for you. I just like to listen to you singing." Now that the conversation had begun, Chen Lian didn't bother to beat around the bush and said directly, although I am a very casual person, but I have own principles. The princess couldn't help but choked, you tell me your principles? Gong Li? Chen Miran? Wang Zuxian? Give your partner Bai Qing back. Is this your principle? Chen Lian, it seems that the princess has been busy these days. She checked herself thoroughly, but the check was not so detailed. Mr. Zhou obviously did not check. No, it is impossible for the princess not to know that the people from the Huaying crew, we all know it, and it will be clear once you ask. So, the princess can't see how transparent young Master Zhou is. It's really not good at all to watch people prepare dishes. Do you have anything to say now? What nonsense principles are you talking about? The princess pressed. Chen Lian explained stubbornly, they and I are both good friends, not the kind of relationship you think. Then I also want to be a good friend. The princess was so angry that she blurted out shocking words. We are friends. Chen Lian turned his head and looked at the princess's bright eyes, looking at the anger brewing inside, and quickly explained, the main thing is that I don't like to get involved in other people's feelings. It's against morality. This is mine. In principle. Who knows what is going on between her and Do Wei? Chen Lian will not put himself in a dangerous situation. Princess, how can a scumbag pretend to be a moral saint here? Bullshit principle. You. The princess cursed several times, and finally gave up. She leaned on the seat and gasped, obviously very angry. Chen Lian took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it. He didn't care about the princess's swear words. Sometimes he wanted to scold himself, but Chen Lian's attitude towards the princess was very firm, and he would never be a thief who interferes with other people's feelings. Light green smoke surrounded the carriage, making people's eyes feel a little stingy. The princess rubbed the corners of her eyes and rolled down the window to take a breath. I'm so pissed off by this bitch. Chen Lian threw the cigarette butt out of the car, took out his mobile phone and looked at the time and said, it's getting late, why don't we just sit here? Otherwise. Do you dare to go to bed with me? The princess cursed bitterly. She had been cleaning up at home for so long, who would have thought it would end like this? It's really not possible now. I'm a principled man. Chen Lian put away the phone that was about to run out of battery, and then said, I'm hungry, why don't I go eat, or drink a little? As if she had received some signal, the princess immediately started the car, stepped on the accelerator and jumped out. Drive slower. Chen Lian held onto the car door, fearing that the princess would send him away. The princess snorted and said, I can't wait any longer, I'm very hungry now. Chen Lian watched the car speed getting faster and faster and shouted quickly, I'm treating you. I promise to feed you. Can you please slow down? You said it. If you don't feed me tonight, you will die. What? Have you misunderstood something? Don't say such rude words. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 129. Chapter 129-127. Make money just to spend it? The weather in Beijing in mid-May was very cool, neither too cold nor too hot. Everyone took off their heavy cotton-padded clothes and put on fashionable singles to flaunt their youth in the night. Leather jackets and leather trousers seemed to be popular this year. If you have a few tufts of yellow hair, you will definitely be the most beautiful kid on the street. However, the most eye-catching outfit is the fashion suit. Men's suits are mostly loose and made of various colors. Women's suits are more fashionable, with large shoulder pads and short skirts, and they look great with stockings. The princess also looked very nice in what she wore today. She looked quite sexy in an off-the-shoulder black dress paired with blue pointed toe high heels. The only drawback was that she was too thin and not much to look at. Chen Lian put down the mutton skewers in his hand and looked away from the princess's feet with some pity. Does it look good? If you want to see it openly, Why don't you look down, the princess said, flipping her hair. Chen Lian took a sip of beer and said, the face is not as good looking as the legs. What are you looking at if you don't look at the legs? Princess, are you praising me or hurting me? Are you full? It's time to go home and sleep. After eating, Chen Lian poured out the last bit of wine from the bottle, clinked the glasses with the princess and finished the drink in one gulp. I'm going to pay. Be careful when you drive back. What do you mean? The princess put down the cup and grabbed Chen Lian, who was about to get up, and asked, is this the end? Chen Lian sat down again and lit a cigarette. His eyes paused on a beautiful woman wearing stockings at the next table, and then he said, what else? Ming has something else to do and has made an appointment to see the house. It's not interesting. I just pretend to be stupid. The princess couldn't help but cursed, and then suddenly remembered something and said to Chen Lian, do you really want to buy a courtyard house? I have helped you find a few in the past few days, and I will accompany you to see them tomorrow. Look. Chen Lian quickly refused and said, don't bother, I won't look at the courtyard house for the time being. I made inquiries 2 days ago and found that it would be too troublesome to renovate. I plan to buy a large flat floor first. The flat floor is pretty good too. Why don't you consider the villa? The princess held her chin and asked, don't you have enough money? I can lend it to you. Chen Lian shook the empty wine bottle, smacked his lips and said, the villa is too far away and it's inconvenient. Besides, I'm the only one here, so it's boring to live in a villa. It would be nice to find someone to live with. The princess gently kicked Chen Lian with her foot under the table, and even a fool could hear the hint in her words. Fool Chen pretended not to hear, took out the money from his wallet, put it on the table and shouted to the boss in the distance, boss, the money is on the table. I'm leaving. You should go back early to accompany your boyfriend. After Chen Lian said that, he stood up and prepared to run with his long legs. This time the princess didn't stop her. She sat on the chair and looked at Chen Lian and said, I told you I broke up. You will know it by reading the newspaper in a few days. Next time I come to you, don't avoid me. It's good for the two of us. We go out to play cards and sing together when we have nothing to do. There's no need, Chen Lian said, then put the cigarette butt in his hand into the bottle of wine, waved to the princess and said, that's it for tonight. See you later. Go back and drive carefully. Leave me alone, I can do whatever I want, the princess muttered, and then watched Chen Lian leave. It's so troublesome. Chen Lian feels that since he became famous, his charm has been amplified. No wonder those successful people always attract the favor of many beauties. It's not about whether you have money or not. The main thing is that the aura brought by your status will be a big bonus. A handsome teenage boy is not attractive, but if you say an innocent boy, he is attractive. If he were older and upgraded the innocent boy to a sports student, he would be able to gain a lot of points. In a few years the little wolf dog becomes a domineering president, so he is invincible. The person is still the same person, but the attraction increases exponentially as the identity changes. Until he finally turned into a little old man with a pension, he still didn't dominate the park and fascinated the little old lady. Chen Lian's current status is very attractive to women in the literary and art circles. He is a rich and good-looking artist. Money is a bonus, good looks is a bonus, and being an artist is the final killer. The free and unrestrained 1990s were not as Philistine as they would be later. Money was not the first priority for everyone. There were many talented people in the entertainment industry who were not obsessed with girls. Even the idiots who sing rock and roll have a wide range of attacks. To be precise, some of the scumbags who sing rock and roll are just like a bunch of fangirls who lie in bed every day. Can you believe it? Compared with those people, Chen Lian is nothing but a mere shrimp. Early the next morning, Chen Lian went to look at the house. It was a new community in the 3rd Ring Road outside the 2nd Ring Road. The location was very good. It was convenient to go everywhere. The surrounding facilities were also complete. The most important one was the school district. Although Chen Lian can't use it, but this is a bonus. On the large flat floor on the 18th floor, Chen Lian was quite satisfied with the overall layout of the room. There were 5 bedrooms and 2 living rooms, and the balcony and living room were both very large. Mr. Chen, this house is the king of buildings. It has the best layout and view, and the lighting is very good. It is transparent from north to south. A beautiful saleswoman in a black suit introduced enthusiastically. Chen Lian walked around and felt quite satisfied, so he asked, "Can I get a discount if I book directly today?" Seeing that Chen Lian was so interested, the beautiful saleswoman immediately said enthusiastically, "I can help you apply for the biggest discount, 9.5% off, and I can also give you 3 major items, a TV, a refrigerator, and a washing machine." Chen Lian didn't care how much the 3 big items were worth. A 50% discount was already pretty good, so he said, "Okay, let's prepare the contract." Buying a house these days is very troublesome. It's not that the procedures are difficult to handle, but that it's too troublesome to pay. You can't swipe your credit card gracefully, and I always feel like I'm not rich enough. After working hard all morning, Chen Lian finally finished the house. The sales department will help with the messy procedures behind it. Chen Lian is such a big customer. A house costs 1.1 million, but you have to wait for it. "Mr. Chen, it's time for dinner, let me treat you to a meal." The beautiful salesperson with a good figure warmly invited Chen Lian opposite. Chen Lian glanced at the bright spring scenery, shook his head and said, "I made an appointment. Thank you for your kindness. I have completed the return procedures. Please give me a call." Although the beautiful saleswoman was disappointed, she still smiled and responded, "Okay, I will help you deal with it as soon as possible." After Chen Lian left, the beautiful saleswoman sighed with regret. She was rich, young, and handsome, so it would be great if she could win. "Hey, don't look, there's no one around. It's a pity that such a high-quality man didn't seize the opportunity." A colleague next to him joked with a smile. "Screw you, I'm just checking to see if there are any big customers coming over. It would be great if I can place another order today. Are you still opening an order? You've made thousands of dollars from this order, but I'm so envious of you. You must treat me tonight." Chen Lian, a good man outside the sales department, hailed a taxi and drove straight to Xinjiao. "We did have an appointment at noon, and it was Mr. Zhou whom we hadn't seen for a long time. This girl quietly took over a movie, and now it's finished. After getting paid, she wants to treat Chen Lian to dinner." In a Western restaurant, Chen Lian met Mr. Zhou, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, and felt that she looked much prettier again. Mr. Zhou, who had been waiting for a long time, saw Chen Lian very excited and held his hand and was unwilling to let go. Chen Lian looked at the somewhat clingy young Master Zhou and couldn't help but rub her head. "It's true that Lolita is very quirky. Why do you always like to rub my head? My hair is messed up." Mr. Zhou looked up at Chen Lian, slapped his hand away complainingly, and straightened his short hair. Chen Lian smiled and said, "Is your hair permed? Is it necessary for filming?" "Well, doesn't this look good?" Mr. Zhou asked with a smile. Chen Lian looked at Mr. Zhou, who had a schoolgirl hairstyle from the Republic of China period, and said with a smile, "It looks good, but it looks a bit dated. What kind of scene are you filming this time?" "Na Hong, who plays the heroine when she was young, plays the same person as Mr. Goyele," Mr. Zhou said with a smile. Chen Lian recalled it and had no impression, so he asked, "How do you feel? When will the movie be released?" "It feels pretty good. Although I don't have many roles, I gained a lot after finishing speaking," Mr. Zhou said in a mysterious manner. "When the movie is released in September, you will know if you go and see it." "I did a great job." Seeing the confident Mr. Zhou, Chen Lian was also very pleased. Before, On the Huaying crew, the little girl had contact with Zhang Guorong and Gong Li every day, and she was quite unsure of herself. "Well, you must go and see it. You are born to be an actor," Chen Lian said with a smile. After chatting for a while, Chen Lian suddenly looked at Mr. Zhou and asked, "Can you drive?" "Yes." "Have you bought a car?" Mr. Zhou asked curiously. "I'm planning to buy it, but I can't drive and I'm too lazy to learn." "I'll have to find a driver in the future." Chen Lian is really too lazy to drive now and is not tired enough. Mr. Zhou felt bad when he saw Chen Lian's lazy look. He shook his arm and said, "Why are you like a veteran cotter? You are too lazy to learn to drive." "I don't want to learn, driving is too tiring." Chen Lian is too lazy to learn. It is really tiring to drive a manual transmission. There are too few automatic transmission cars in China now, and it will take 10 years for it to become popular. Mr. Zhou looked at Chen Lian speechlessly, having no way to deal with his character, so he could only say, "It's up to you, but where can you find a driver? Drivers' wages are very high now. You, since you're not filming any scenes right now, be my driver for a few days. It just so happens that you can still drive to the audition, which can save a lot of time." Listening to Chen Lian's words, Mr. Zhou suddenly smiled, tilted his head and looked at Chen Lian and said, "Are you looking for this excuse to buy me a car? You just rented me a house, and now you're buying a car. You just want to support me." Chen Lian didn't bother to explain and said casually, "Whatever you think. How much will you get for this film? Do you have enough money?" 3,000 yuan is enough for me to use for a while." Mr. Zhou patted his pocket and said happily. It was really a lot to earn 3,000 yuan at a time in 1995. Chen Lian didn't think it was much, and said calmly, 3,000 is enough for what you do, it's not even enough to buy a phone. Then you buy it for me. Well, let's go take a look after dinner. In the afternoon, Chen Lian bought Mr. Zhou the latest phone, and the two of them ran to look at the car. You don't know if you don't know. When he saw the prices of those cars, Mr. Zhou was so frightened that he pulled him away. "It's better not to buy a car. It's too expensive. That Austrian car cost 460,000 yuan, so I couldn't get it this way." Mr. Zhou felt that his salary of 3,000 yuan per movie was not worthy of driving such an expensive car. 460,000, how many movies does she have to film to earn so much money? Mr. Zhou quickly calculated in his mind, if he earned 5,000 yuan per movie, he would have to make 92 movies. I won't be able to finish filming in my lifetime. Chen Lian also thinks that 460,000 yuan to buy an Audi A6 is a bit expensive, but cars are not cheap these days, and a Jifang bread costs 110,000 yuan. But isn't the purpose of making money just for spending it? Otherwise, why would you earn it? Just keep it at home and watch it. It's not like I won't make money in the future. My second uncle should be able to make a lot of money by the end of the year, and then I should worry about how to spend money." Chen Lian patted Mr. Zhou's hand and said, "It's okay. It's convenient to have a car, otherwise you would have to take a taxi every day for auditions. I'll take the subway." Mr. Zhou felt that he couldn't let Chen Lian spend any more money. A phone cost more than 10,000, and he bought a car worth hundreds of thousands. Even if he sold her, it wouldn't be enough to pay back. Chen Lian rolled his eyes at Mr. Zhou and said, "Can I buy it for myself? I'm a grown man and I don't even have a car." Hearing what Chen Lian said, Mr. Zhou didn't know how to refute. He just muttered depressedly, "If you buy it, you won't know how to drive it. I will be your driver from now on. The relationship is good, and you can get a beautiful driver for free." Chen Lian pinched Mr. Zhou's face and said. Mr. Zhou rolled his eyes at Chen Lian and said resignedly, "Just waste your money and buy a cheap one. The Toyota Accord I looked at earlier is tens of thousands cheaper." "No, I want Audi," Chen Lian said willfully. Mr. Zhou snorted helplessly and said, "Whatever you want." Chen Lian didn't expect to be able to buy a current car in 1995, but he had to wait a few days to pick up the car. Although the country relaxed its policies last year to encourage individuals to buy cars, there were still many procedures. In a few days, Chen Lian wouldn't have time to pick up the car. He handed all the contracts and procedures to Mr. Zhou and said, "We'll finish it later. You can pick up the car yourself. I have to film a movie in the next few days and I don't have time." "Are you free today?" Mr. Zhou asked belatedly. "Yeah, I'm free today." "Then why are you still here? Let's go home quickly." "Why don't you be in such a hurry? It's not even 6 o'clock yet. Don't you know how long it takes for you to be alone?" After the two returned to Mr. Zhou's house, Chen Lian saw a few sheets drying on the balcony. He turned to look at Mr. Zhou and asked, "Have you washed them in advance?" "Yes, just change it later," Mr. Zhou said. His eyes became wet, and he looked at Chen Lian in confusion with water vapor. Chen Lian looked at the emotional Mr. Zhou, grabbed her waist and kissed her. After an unknown amount of time, Mr. Zhou weakly kicked Chen Lian and said, "Go and bring in clean sheets. It's so uncomfortable to sleep wet." Chen Lian glanced at Mr. Zhou, who seemed to be made of water, gently scratched her nose and said, "Don't stay in bed next time, otherwise there won't be enough sheets to change. You have so many tricks up your sleeve and you still blame me. I'll throw away those things of yours later." Mr. Zhou turned over and lay on Chen Lian's chest and complained. Chen Lian asked with a smile, "I didn't buy a few things, right? Don't you like them too?" Mr. Zhou suddenly blushed with embarrassment, turned over and sat on Chen Lian and said, "You still said that? You will die tonight. Who is afraid of whom? Why change the sheets? Then play music and then dance. I'm going to learn from Uncle Lu Huang tonight." Early the next morning, Chen Lian was sitting in the living room eating breakfast. The sunlight on the balcony was shining warmly on him, and the sheets that were originally hanging on the balcony were no longer there. There were several sheets piled in the dirty clothes basket next to it, exuding a lustful smell. After Chen Lian finished breakfast, he threw the sheets into the washing machine and left without disturbing Mr. Zhou, who was still sleeping. In the dressing room of Beijing Film Studio, Chen Lian yawned and changed into a robe. Zhang Guorong, who had just finished applying special effects makeup next to him, waited for the makeup artist to go out before he couldn't help but said, "I saw you getting into Jing Wen's car the day before yesterday. She has boyfriend, are you going a little too far?" "I just had a meal with her, it's not what you think." Chen Lian rolled his eyes at Zhang Guorong. Who did he think he was? Zhang Guorong couldn't help but punched Chen Lian and said, "Look at how convincing you are now." Looking at the ferocious-looking Zhang Guorong, Chen Lian resisted the urge to punch him back and explained helplessly, "I was with Mr. Zhou yesterday. I am a principled person. Don't think nonsense." "It's best," Zhang Guorong said angrily. Chen Lian flipped his hair in front of the mirror and said perfunctorily, "Okay, don't worry about me anymore, get ready to start work." There are not many scenes in the studio. Most of the scenes in the entire movie are in the built theater, and most of Chen Lian's scenes are like this. In the movie, Wei Qing was used by Song Danpin, grew up under his guidance, and rehearsed Romeo and Juliet. And he used the name Song Danpin, which attracted many audiences to watch the show. Wei Qing, who had successfully transformed this time, perfectly performed the performance with the help of Song Danpin. Winning applause and cheers from all the audience, Wei Qing was very excited. He finally succeeded and became famous. But what he didn't expect was that Song Danpin was just using him. He wanted Wei Qing to meet Yun Yan on his behalf, to fulfill his agreement with Yun Yan, and to sing to Yun Yan on the full 15th day of the month. Song Danpin was disfigured by the fire. He did not have the courage to face Yun Yan, and he felt very remorseful and guilty. Yun Yan had been crazy for 10 years, but he had done nothing. If Wei Qing had not appeared this time, he would have continued to hide and spend the rest of your life in this dilapidated theater. The success of the performance also aroused the appreciation of high-ranking officials, and the person who appreciated it was Mr. Zhao, who snatched Yunyan away from her and Song Danpin 10 years ago. In order to force Yunyan to marry him back home, Mr. Zhao burned down the theater and returned to Song Danpin. On the wedding day, he discovered that Yunyan was not a virgin, so he ruined the marriage and broke Yunyan's legs. Yunyan's parents also felt that they were too shameless to see others, so they kicked Yunyan out of the house. Since then, she has been crazy for 10 years. Now Mr. Zhao fell in love with Wei Qing's partner and girlfriend again, so he invited them to dinner. Wei Qing looked at the fake Mr. Zhao, who was sitting opposite him, and knew very well what kind of person he was, and felt a lot of reluctance in his heart, even though he had put on an exquisite suit and was no longer the little man in a robe. But there is still no way to put on a fake smile. Wei Qing's heart was full of disgust and anger towards Mr. Zhao. The opera itself was beautiful, but in the eyes of these people, it was just a piece of fun, or even a joke. Wei Qing, sing a piece for Director Zhao, the group leader said with a smile on his face. Wei Qing had a cold face, even though he was extremely angry, but he still had a gentle temper. He did not get angry. He just stood up and said, "I am not a singer and I don't sing." Wei Qing's girlfriend, who was also his partner, held his hand and tried to persuade him. Although Wei Qing was angry in his heart, he also knew that these people should not be offended too much. He turned around and looked at them and said, "I still have a date, I'll leave first." Wei Qing, with helplessness and anger hidden in his heart, suddenly felt that even though he was famous, he was just a clown in the eyes of the powerful. Feeling extremely depressed, he returned to the theater, stood in the empty theater, and watched the moonlight cast by the glass curtain hall and sang loudly. Sing loudly and vent your helplessness and sorrow through singing. The night of the full moon was an agreement between Song Danking and Yunyan. On this night, just like the past 10 years, Yunyan came to the theater to wait for the man who never waited to sing for her. Yunyan came to the theater wearing a red dress and her hair was extremely messy. She heard the singing voice, which had not appeared in 10 years. She stumbled into the theater and looked at Wei Qing singing loudly under the moonlight. Think of it as Song Danpin. Okay. You sang so well, Danpin, you are finally here. Yunyan stared blankly at Wei Qing, who couldn't stop clapping with a silly smile on his face. Wei Qing turned around and looked at Yunyan, who was as happy as a child, and instantly understood something in his mind. He has been a pawn from beginning to end. Song Danpin doesn't really want to help him. He has his own purpose. This is his purpose. Such a discovery made Wei Qing unable to bear the anger in his heart anymore. The dignitaries looked down on him, Song Danpin also took advantage of him, and everyone regarded him as a pawn and a clown who sang for fun on stage. Wei Qing's eyes were full of anger, but he couldn't lose his temper when facing the foolish Yunyan. He could not help but run to the attic after the maid who had been accompanying her pulled Yunyan away. In the attic, Song Danpin was sitting on the piano wearing a cloak and playing indulgently. At this moment, his goal was finally achieved and he was finally able to fulfill his promise on the night of clouds and full moon. Wei Qing looked at Song Danpin, who was playing the piano, grabbed the swaying armrest with both hands and shouted angrily, "It turns out everything is a deal. You taught me to sing Romeo just to pretend to be you. Why don't you go see her since you are not dead?" Wei Qing's roar caused Song Danpin to stop playing the piano. He did not answer Wei Qing's question, but turned around and slowly took off his cloak, revealing his face that had been hidden in the darkness. Wei Qing looked at Song Danpin's face and took a step back. He stared blankly at the burned and terrifying face, and suddenly understood everything. It's not that he doesn't want to see her, it's that he doesn't want Yunyan to see him like he is now. All the anger in Wei Qing's heart disappeared at this moment, turning into confusion and sympathy as to what role he should play in this story. This one passed. That's great, You Rentai shouted excitedly, Lian, you really brought this role to life. If it weren't for the limitations of the script, your role would be better than Kworong's. The angle is wonderful. There is one more chapter, and I am a bit slow in typing tonight. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu Xiaomao. Chapter 130. Chapter 130-128. Wu Jianlian, I won't suffer in the kissing scene. In the attic filled with dust and cobwebs, Chen Lian looked at Zhang Kworong with deep sympathy during his break. Emotional outbursts are often caused by too much accumulation. Wei Qing's emotional outburst towards Song Danpin was also the result of Chen Lian's emotional accumulation. Chen Lian's performance has never been stylized. It is difficult to perform without emotion in his heart. Just like the sympathy for Zhang Kworong when he was questioned just now, Chen Lian can find support in Chen Lian's confusion. Zhang Kworong looked at Chen Lian's strange eyes, frowned and asked, why are you still looking like this? I'm not really disfigured, why are you looking at me with such sympathy? It's nothing, I just hope you won't be like Song Danpin. Chen Lian sighed, patted Zhang Kworong's shoulder and said, I hope you and Mr. Tang can be together forever. Speaking of this, Zhang Kworong's expression darkened, and he suddenly shook his cloak and said with emotion, I wish I had a cloak and an attic. It would be quite clean to hide here. Chen Lian stretched and twisted his neck, and said with a relaxed expression but a very serious tone, why are you hiding? There are many people who are unhappy with me. I'm still hiding at home and can't come out, so I just want to hang out in front of them, and I like the way they look at me and see how they can't get rid of me. You are you and I am me, Zhang Kworong said with some envy. They are all different fireworks, right? Chen Lian rolled his eyes at Zhang Kworong and said, why do you want to make fireworks? I want to make the moon hanging in the sky. What is the meaning of fleeting beauty? For the poignancy of my own moment and moved. Just talk nonsense. Leslie Chung looked at the wanton and flamboyant Chen Lian. This was the reason why he liked to be friends with Chen Lian. He had something that he didn't have. He was free and easy and had his own persistence and opinions on everything. I hope you can keep it up and don't be like me, Zhang Kworong said quietly. Chen Lian sighed and said, you have done a good job, but you are too serious, too sensitive, too fragile, too kind, be selfish, be self-centered, be strong, and don't use your long life to heal the misfortunes of the past. He always likes to help others, but he can't bear to see the suffering of others. He is busy saving others all day long, but he doesn't know how to save himself. I'm not as bad as you said, Zhang Kworong denied it, as if someone had exposed the deepest sensitivity in his heart. Chen Lian glanced at him and didn't bother to expose him. He put his arms around his shoulders and said, you should learn from me. Look how happy I am. Why do I care so much about others? I always put my emotions on others. Are you stupid? Is this why you have so many good friends? Yes, what I love most is myself, why do I expect others to love me? After Zhang Kworong listened to Chen Lian's words, he was silent for a long time and said slowly, no wonder you are such a scumbag. What's wrong with you, scum? You must be happy first before you can make others happy. I'm not a savior, Chen Lian replied nonchalantly. Zhang Kworong's eyes changed slightly, and then he pushed Chen Lian away with feigned disgust and said, I'm too lazy to tell you, those of yours are all nonsense. Whether it's unreasonable or not, you know in your heart, Chen Lian replied, and stopped talking nonsense with Zhang Kworong. He turned and walked towards Lu Ling, who was waving to him. Senior, what's wrong? Do you have anything to do with me? Chen Lian walked up to Lu Ling and asked. Lu Ling looked at Chen Lian, who was wearing a formal suit, and said in a low voice, do you have time tonight? I want to treat you to dinner. It doesn't matter if it's a little later. Chen Lian looked at Lu Ling's cautious look and asked a little strangely, "Sister, didn't we agree to have dinner together after we finish filming? Are you afraid that I will default on my debt?" "No, no, that's it." Lu Ling struggled for a moment and then said sheepishly, "I went back and told my classmates about you before, and they were all very curious about you, that's it?" "That's it, I understand." Chen Lian understood, but he really wasn't in the mood to deal with a group of seniors. He is not a mascot, so what's so good about him? The key is the seniors of Lu Ling's class. Chen Lian, the only one who was interested, returned to Wan Wan. "Senior, I'm a bit weird. I don't really like eating with strangers. Let's forget it this time. When it's finalized, I'll treat Senior to dinner alone." Listening to Chen Lian's words, Lu Ling tugged her fingers in annoyance, knowing that this would be the result. She would not have said anything if she had known it. It's all Su Jingglei's fault. After rejecting Lu Ling, Chen Lian walked up to Leslie Chung and said, "See if you can, just say no when it's time to say no. I won't wrong myself just because my senior sister can't explain it to her classmates when she goes back." "You don't like Lu Ling, right?" Leslie Chung ruthlessly exposed Chen Lian's true inner thoughts. Chen Lian was not embarrassed and said with a smile, "Look, this is what I want to teach you. You have to be thick-skinned. As long as I am not embarrassed, others will be embarrassed." Zhang Guorong, "This guy makes a lot of nonsense, but it sounds quite reasonable." Regardless of whether it makes sense or not, Zhang Guorong kept these words in his heart. The filming of the movie will continue, and the next scenes will not be too difficult for Chen Lian. The Tool Man's mission is about to be completed, and what is left is Leslie Chung's emotional explosion. In the dark attic, Wei Qing listened to Song Danpin telling his story, and he had a lot of thoughts in his heart. He sympathized with Song Danpin and Yun Yan as well as himself. He once thought that he would also be the protagonist on the stage, but in the end it was all in vain. Song Danpin asked Wei Qing to help him send a letter to Yun Yan, and Wei Qing agreed because he sympathized with Song Danpin's infatuation and misery. But after finding Yun Yan with this letter, Wei Qing felt a sense of sadness in his heart. Facing Yun Yan, who mistook him for Song Danpin, he sympathized with himself as well as Song Danpin and Yun Yan. Who should be blamed for this? Blame the world or blame those high-ranking officials who destroy the fate of others for their own preferences? Facing Yun Yan, who was full of joy, Wei Qing could only continue to play Song Danpin and take out the letter and hand it to her. "Whatever you wrote, you read it to me. I want to hear you read it to me." Yun Yan happily sat next to Wei Qing and hugged his arm. Wei Qing endured the embarrassment and discomfort in his heart and opened the letter awkwardly, only to find that there was only a blank piece of paper inside. He blocked the letter in a panic, feeling angry at Song Danpin's cowardice. But the play had already reached this point, and Wei Qing had to recite a poem by himself, and then he was about to put the letter away, but Yun Yan grabbed the letter and wanted to put it away. "It's so well written. I want to put it away and keep it well." Yun Yan happily walked around the room and carefully folded the letter. Wei Qing felt slightly relieved when he saw that Yun Yan did not open the letter, but just put it away. He really couldn't bear the already crazy Yun Yan to be hurt again. "Ka, Yu Rentai frowned and stopped the performance of the two. He stood up on his chair and walked over. He looked at Wu Qianlian and said, "Qianlian, your performance just now was too good. The Song Danpin you faced, you need to be more intimate and passionate. He is not Wei Qing now, you need to understand this." Chen Lian stood aside and said nothing. He didn't feel that it was not intimate enough. He just felt that Wu Qianlian's performance just now was a little more silly. At this time, Yun Yan should be more like a normal person. Wu Qianlian said sheepishly, "I'm sorry, director, I'm still not in the right state yet. Let's do one more." Yu Rentai nodded, then looked at Chen Lian and said, "Lian, when you read the poem later, your mood will be a little more empty, not so full, and don't express the character's sympathy and embarrassment too directly. You should also think of yourself as Song Danpin. I want the feeling of you falling in love with her. Chen Lian, what is this operation? Wei Qing falls in love with Yun Yan? Don't understand, Yu Rentai asked with a smile. Chen Lian shook his head and said, let me think about it. Well, let's think about it together with the subsequent scenes, Yu Rentai said with a smile, then clapped his hands and said, take a break for 10 minutes and shoot again later. Chen Lian frowned and looked at each other with Wu Jianlian. Both of them were a little depressed. Wu Jianlian had acted opposite Leslie Chung before and was not used to treating Chen Lian as Song Danpin. Chen Lian was depressed because Ren Tai said that Wei Qing fell in love with Yun Yan. Why is this happening? Logically speaking, it shouldn't be. There is no emotional foreshadowing or metaphor between the two in the script. Recalling that Yu Rentai had just said that he should combine the scenes and think about it, Chen Lian turned over the script and looked at the subsequent scenes. After pondering for a while, he understood what Yu Rentai meant. Wei Qing should not only sympathize with Yun Yan at this time, but also envy the relationship between Song Danpin and Yun Yan from the bottom of his heart, and envied Song Danpin for having a woman who loved him so much. Wei Qing should appreciate Yun Yan's emotions in his heart, and at the same time, he also longs for a girlfriend who loves him so much. In the previous scene, Wei Qing angrily left the table at Mr. Zhao's juxtation, and none of his girlfriends followed him. Wei Qing was disappointed, so when faced with such an infatuated woman like Yun Yan, his heart was filled with longing, and maybe even desire. I have thought about really replacing Song Danpin and having such pure love. After pondering for a while, Chen Lian finally understood, and why Wei Qing couldn't help but kiss Yun Yan later, and why he was angry at the cowardly Song Danpin, because Wei Qing felt that the cowardly Song Danpin was not worthy of such a passionate love as Yun Yan. Chen Lian closed the script and felt that he was a little careless and did not understand it that deeply. In the final analysis, it was his own view of love that affected his understanding of the script. Chen Lian did not have the same desire for love as Wei Qing did not yearn for the beauty of love, and did not naively believe that love is pure, so he did not understand the deepest emotional fluctuations in Wei Qing's heart. After thinking about it, Chen Lian slowly breathed a sigh of relief. When he looked at Wu Jianlian again, the emotion in his eyes was different. It was no longer sympathy and embarrassment, but a well-hidden envy and desire. Wu Jianlian, who was also adjusting her condition, felt a little trembled in her heart when she saw Chen Lian's eyes. She really saw love in Chen Lian's eyes, and she felt as if she had acted opposite Leslie Chung before. At that moment, Wu Jianlian really thought of Chen Lian as Song Danpin, but a hint of shyness flashed deeper in her heart. How on earth could this guy express such delicate emotions with one look? If she hadn't known that this was filming, Wu Jianlian would have almost thought that Chen Lian was interested in her. How's it going? Have you found the feeling? Yu Rentai sat on the director's chair and said, if you're not ready, you two should have more contact. There will be a kiss scene later. Wu Jianlian glanced at Chen Lian and saw the tenderness in his eyes. Her heart trembled and she quickly said, okay, director, we have found the feeling, and we can start. Okay, let's get ready. The actors have reset and the scene is ready, Yu Rentai shouted immediately, without even asking Chen Lian whether he understood the question he just said. Yu Rentai is not blind, and he can tell at a glance that the way Chen Lian looked at Wu Jianlian just now is different, so there is no need to ask more. Chen Lian's performance during this period made him trust Chen Lian's acting skills. Wu Jianlian slowly adjusted her emotions and said to Chen Lian, you can calm down a little later. Your eyes are too lethal. I'm afraid I've overacted. Okay, I'll control it, but don't worry. You just acted very well, but you just lacked the feeling of a normal person. The Yunyan who sees her lover needs to be different from the usual crazy Yunyan. Chen Lian nodded slightly. After hearing this, Wu Jianlian nodded slightly and said gratefully, I understand. I felt something was wrong just now. I thought I just didn't find the state. Okay, let's perform well later and try to get it over once and for all. Director, you can't let us underestimate us. Okay, Wu Jianlian smiled, and then joked, you have to perform well in the kissing scene later and try to do it once. Chen Lian couldn't help but rolled his eyes at Wu Jianlian and said, who do you think I am? How could I deliberately take advantage of you? That's possible. If you dare to slander me, you're finished. I'll deliberately slander you later. It's up to you. Anyway, I'm at a disadvantage again. Don't you all like big chapters? Chapters with more than 5,000 words are skipped. Seriously, if you don't like it, I will change it to 3001 chapters. Fringe artists in the entertainment industry. Author, Chizu de Xiaomao. Chapter 131. Chapter 131 129. How can anyone who writes novels be as good at art? The theater is particularly quiet at night. Chen Lian and Wu Jianlian stand opposite each other. The white moonlight shining from the top of the glass curtain is particularly poignant. Would you like some chewing gum? Chen Lian took out the chewing gum from his pocket and handed it to Wu Jianlian. Wu Jianlian glanced at Chen Lian, took the chewing gum and said, are you afraid that I will dislike you, or will you dislike me? Where are you thinking? I'm doing this for a better experience, Chen Lian said, paused, and then quickly explained, to get better results. Wu Jianlian looked at Chen Lian's deliberately funny look, smiled and said, no need to explain, I understand, I guarantee you a great experience. Chen Lian. The next scene was very simple, with emotions, hugs, and kisses almost in one go. However, at the last moment, Yun Yan was horrified after discovering that the person she was close to was not Song Danpin. Wu Jianlian did not act well. Chen Lian wiped the lipstick on the corner of his mouth and said, don't be so involved. You have to remove your emotions from the kiss scene. I just forgot the words. Wu Jianlian rolled her eyes at Chen Lian. There are 2 sentences in total, can you still forget the words? Are you a liar? Chen Lian glanced at Wu Jianlian and did not expose her clumsy lies. If you want to eat my tofu, just say so. The makeup artist ran over to touch up Wu Jianlian's makeup, and looked at Wu Jianlian with some envy. It would be great if she could do this kiss scene herself. Chen Lian is so handsome and nice, it would be great to have a kiss. The makeup artist's mind was racing with thoughts, but her hands were not slow. She quickly touched up the makeup, put down the lipstick in her hand and said, Teacher Wu, it's done. Thank you, sorry for bothering you, Wu Jianlian said politely. The makeup artist was a sister in her 30s. She showed a smile that every woman knows and said, it's not troublesome. It'll be fine if you touch it up a few times. After hearing what the makeup artist said, Wu Jianlian's expression froze and she forced an awkward smile. She really didn't know how to answer. Okay, get ready, here's another one, Yu Rentai shouted with a loudspeaker. The makeup artist immediately picked up the things and left, and Wu Jianlian breathed a sigh of relief, avoiding the embarrassment. Women still understand women, I just invested a little bit. The 2 people returned to the camera, briefly adjusted their emotions, and then made an okay gesture to the director. Chen Lian looked at Wu Jianlian and said, try to do it once. I'll wrap it up as soon as this film is finished. I know Wu Jianlian didn't know what was going on, and she was still a little reluctant. She had been quite happy acting with Chen Lian these 2 days. The scene is quiet, all departments are ready, let's start. After Wu Jianlian heard it, she immediately put away her emotions and put herself into the role. The 2 stood opposite each other and looked at each other passionately. Under the catalysis of the moonlight, the 2 hugged each other. Looking into each other's eyes, the love in their hearts surged out uncontrollably. Words were pale at this moment, only actions, only then can the emotions of 2 people be expressed. The two of them approached each other at the same time, turning their love at this moment into a passionate kiss. Hidden in the darkness, Song Danpin watched his lover hugging and kissing Wei Qing, and his heart burned with raging anger. Damn Wei Qing. Let him pretend to be himself, not really think of himself as Song Danpin. Unable to bear it, Song Danpin sang Romeo and Juliet loudly in the dark. The smart and sad singing immediately interrupted the two kissing each other. Yunyan woke up immediately after listening to the familiar singing. She opened her eyes and looked at Wei Qing's horrified expression. He took a step back and said loudly, "You are not a Danpin. You are not a Danpin." After waking up, Yunyan immediately fell into a crazy state and ran away in a panic. The scene just now reminded her of her memory of being frivolous by Mr. Zhao. Wei Qing looked at Yunyan, who was running away like crazy, then turned around and looked at Song Danpin, who was walking out of the darkness. "I asked you to play me, but I didn't ask you to act so realistically." Song Danpin looked at Wei Qing and roared. The emotions in Wei Qing's heart were very complicated. He became angry at Song Danpin's cowardice and shouted angrily, "Since you love her so much, go see her. You coward!" Song Danpin was stunned after hearing this. His black cloak swayed slightly as if he was struggling. Then he returned to calmness, as if he had made up his mind. "Okay. Lian is finished," Yu Rentai shouted with a smile. Applause suddenly broke out in the studio, and everyone shouted congratulations to Mr. Chen for finishing the filming. Chen Lian also breathed a sigh of relief, smiled and handed over to everyone who shouted congratulations, then walked up to Zhang Quorong and said, "I'm done, let's celebrate together tonight." Zhang Quorong lifted up his cloak and said, "You have finished filming and I haven't finished filming. There are still night scenes in the evening. Let me treat you to dinner after I finish filming. I won't be in the country until you finish filming. I'm going to Venice in a few days." Chen Lian counted the time and said. Leslie Chung also suddenly said, "I forgot that you are going to Venice. If I don't have work then, I will go and have a look." "That's okay, then I'm going to change clothes." Chen Lian pulled on his heavy suit and said, "It's so hot today, I can finally take off these thick clothes. Before I wore a suit, I said I no longer had to wear a long gown, but now I hate it." Zhang Quorong looked at Chen Lian like a scumbag. Chen Lian took off his suit jacket and said, "Wear what you want. Who says you have to wear something if you like it? Just put it in the closet and take it out to wear when the time is right." "Zhang Quorong, I always feel that you are not talking about clothes or wardrobe. Your feeling is right." Chen Lian gave Zhang Quorong an affirmative look and ran to change clothes. If he ran too slowly, Zhang Quorong would definitely nag him again. Chen Lian, who had put on summer clothes in the dressing room, cooled down in front of the electric fan for a while. "Teacher Chen, are you in there? Can I go in?" Lu Ling's voice sounded outside the door. "Here, come in." After hearing this, Lu Ling opened the door and walked in. She also finished filming today. Her scenes were all with Chen Lian, so Chen Lian naturally finished filming her. But when Lu Ling walked in and saw Chen Lian's style, she stopped immediately. She couldn't help but look away and looked at Chen Lian, who was pulling up his clothes and blowing the electric fan. Chen Lian didn't care about his behavior of lifting up his t-shirt. Men don't always do this in summer, and he was on welfare. His 8-pack abs were no joke. After Lu Ling turned her head away, she couldn't help but roll her eyes and looked over. It's human nature to be lustful and appreciate beauty. "Senior sister, what do you want from me?" Chen Lian calmed down and put down his clothes. He was not a male bodhisattva, so how could he continue to receive benefits? Lu Ling looked at Chen Lian's waist that was blocked by the t-shirt with some pity, regretting that she didn't take a few more glances just now. "Senior," Chen Lian looked at Lu Ling, who was in a daze, and shouted again. Hearing Chen Lian's voice, Lu Ling reacted immediately, her ears turned a little red, and she said sheepishly, "I wanted to ask you if you have time today." Yes, I remember that. I still owe my senior a meal. How about going to Gwangju to eat duck? Chen Lian said as he put his things on the dressing table into his pockets. Lu Ling immediately smiled and nodded, and said a little shyly, let me invite you. I should have invited you. Hey, it's just a meal. We'll talk about it then. Chen Lian was too lazy to go back and forth on this matter. He walked up to Lu Ling and said, let's go and talk about it first. Gwangju is pretty good these days. It doesn't have the bad reputation of later generations. The old chefs are still here and the roasted duck is amazing. Chen Lian was rolling the roast duck rolls and suddenly thought of ZB barbecue. When he came back, he only read the news and didn't eat it. Lu Ling held a roast duck roll in both hands and looked at Chen Lian, who was enjoying his meal. She felt that although his eating appearance was casual, he looked very good looking and very masculine. Chen Lian glanced at Lu Ling, who had been looking at him, and asked, Senior, why don't you eat it? It doesn't suit your taste. No, I just think you look pretty when you eat. Lu Ling took a bite of the roast duck roll and whispered. Chen Lian's expression paused, and the image of beautiful sheep suddenly appeared in his mind. After eating 5 or 6 roast duck rolls in a row, Chen Lian was no longer so hungry. He picked up a piece of pea yellow and put it in his mouth and said, Senior sister, are you and Su Jinglei in the same class? Well, do you know Su Jinglei? Lu Ling was stunned for a moment, then raised her head and looked at Chen Lian, but she was surprised that she had never heard Su Jinglei mention Chen Lian. Chen Lian hummed and said, I've met him a few times, so I think we know each other. Is there someone from your class named Wan Wan? Yes, but I left before finishing my freshman year. Lu Ling asked curiously, you seem to know our class very well. I heard it from others, Chen Lian replied casually, and then said, the main reason is that the previous teacher of your class was quite famous, so I knew about it. Teacher Yufi Hung, Lu Ling said with some regret, it's a pity that Brother Fei went to study in the United States. We all like her very much. Chen Lian was quite curious about Yufi Hung, so he asked a lot of questions about Yufi Hung. Lu Ling didn't pay attention at first, but as they chatted, she felt something was wrong. She looked at Chen Lian and asked, are you right, Brother Fei is interesting? No, I'm just curious, Chen Lian denied, having never seen anything interesting. Lu Ling looked at Chen Lian suspiciously, then changed the subject and asked, when will you go to school? Many people in the school are very curious about you. Well, next semester. Chen Lian took a sip of water and said, I'm going to Venice next month, and school will be on vacation when I get back. Lu Ling, the freshman year is over and you haven't attended a single class. But are you going to Venice to participate in the film festival? I'm too busy, I can't help it. Chen Lian took a sip of water and explained, I'm going to attend the Venice Film Festival and the Venice Art Biennale. 2. Lu Ling was a little confused. This was the first time she heard about the Venice Art Biennale. Considering the influence and gold content of the Venice Film Festival, this Art Biennale should also be very powerful. Are there such big differences between people? I am such a waste as a senior. After returning to the dormitory after dinner in the evening, Lu Ling had not come back to her senses until Su Jinglei came over and patted her. What are you thinking about? You are so absorbed. Didn't you wrap up today? Su Jinglei asked as she sat down on Lu Ling's bed. Lu Ling looked at the famous talented girl in the class and asked subconsciously, Jinglei, do you know about the Venice Art Biennale? I know, it's the most valuable exhibition in the art world. It's very powerful. Su Jinglei didn't know much about it at first, but it was only later that she met Chen Lian that she went out of her way to learn about the art world. Hearing what Su Jinglei said, Lu Ling said in a daze, Chen Lian is going to participate in the Venice Film Festival and the Venice Biennale. I feel that he is not from the same world as us. Chen Lian, Su Jinglei's voice rose 2 octaves, and she turned to look at Lu Ling in surprise. Who is who? Who are you talking about? Lu Mei from the upper bunk also stuck her head out and asked. Chen Lian, the most mysterious guy in the school, Su Jinglei replied subconsciously. Suddenly remembering that she still had Chen Lian's phone number, she quickly stood up and ran out.